Everyone has that one movie, show, or band that's become almost a crime to admit you like in public. On the internet, hating on certain things feels like a competitive sport. And when it comes to anime, few shows polarize the fan base quite like the one we're revisiting today. Picture this: you put on a VR headset, dive into a crazy fantasy world, and suddenly find out that if you die in the game, you die in real life. It's basically a Matrix setup, but with swords and magic. That was the massive impact of Sword Art Online. For some, it was the revolutionary phenomenon of 2012. For others, it's their favorite target for unwarranted hate. I actually get the criticism, and the show definitely has its major missteps. But what a lot of people miss out on, just because of blind bias, is an absolutely incredible story. A breathtaking journey that kicks off with the fight for survival in the castle of Aincrad and evolves into the epic battles of Alicization. Sword Art Online isn't just another isekai. It's a story where once you truly grasp its core and push all the nonsense aside, you realize there's a whole lot of soul behind the show. That's why today on the channel, we're going to break down this story from beginning to end, and just maybe I can convince you to give this anime a chance. In the year 2022, humanity reaches peak zero female contact and launches the first virtual reality MMORPG. Our useless, loner protagonist jams the nerve gear onto his head and enters the world of Aincrad as the avatar Kirito, ready to ignore real life forever.
Hello, world. I'm back.
He sprints through the city until a side character named Klein smells his beta tester sweat and begs for private lessons. Out in the fields, Klein gets embarrassingly thrashed by a level 1 boar until Kirito shows him how to handle his sword with mastery. Klein finally lands a hit, feeling immense joy for slicing up a weak digital pig. After spending the whole day playing with their swords in the field, Klein gets hungry and tries to log out to grab a pizza, only to realize the logout button has been straight up deleted from the system. Suddenly, bells toll and every player is abducted to the main plaza. A giant, faceless hologram appears in the sky, introducing himself as Akihiko Kayaba. He warns them that the missing button isn't a bug, it's an exclusive feature. He adds that if any family member tries to remove their headset in the real world, their brains will fry like they're in a microwave, a fact that 213 idiots have already confirmed the hard way. The only way out is to clear all 100 floors of the game. As a parting gift, he shoves a mirror into everyone's inventory. A magical explosion erupts, transforming all the cute e-girls into middle-aged dudes, revealing the true face of despair. Kirito realizes things just got real and tries to drag Klein away to farm resources in the woods, but Klein refuses so he can protect his real-life friends. Something you wouldn't understand. Kirito turns his back, runs out of the city alone, slices a wolf on the way, and vows to survive. A month passes. 2,000 players are already toast, and absolutely nobody has cleared the first floor. A month into the virtual apocalypse, everyone is still stuck on the first floor. In Tobana, a brain-dead idiot named Diabel calls a meeting, revealing he found the boss room and ordering everyone to party up. Kirito panics when he realizes he has no friends, just like you. He spots a hooded, isolated girl, tosses her an invite which she accepts, and discovers her name is Asuna. The peaceful vibe ends when a whiner named Kibao demands that beta testers hand over all their gold and items as an apology for the dead. But a sensible giant named Agil shoves a free manual in his face, proving the testers gave away all their tips on a silver platter. With peace restored, Diabel reads from the manual that the boss switches to a Talwar sword in its final phase, and everyone blindly buys into it. At night, Asuna tries to choke down some sad, dry bread until Kirito sits beside her and offers his creamy white liquid. She swallows it all eagerly because she can't resist licking up free cream, then claims she's not there for the food, but to avoid losing her identity to the game. The next day, the raid kicks down the boss's door. Kirito is shocked by the surreal speed of Asuna's blade work. When the boss hits the red zone, genius Diabel charges in alone to steal the last attack bonus item. The problem? The boss pulls out a giant Nodachi instead of a Talwar and rips the wannabe knight in half. Kirito tries to shove a potion down his throat, but the moron refuses and dies. Kirito and Asuna charge in together with Agil's help, parrying attacks until Kirito finishes the beast and wins a stylish coat. Kibao immediately blames Kirito for Diabel's death. Instead of explaining himself, our protagonist decides to embrace villainy, declaring himself a beater, a supreme race of beta tester plus cheater, humiliating the newbies on on purpose. He leaves the room, tells Asuna to join a real guild, and heads to the second floor with his new reputation as a jerk. We fast forward to April, where Kirito is hiding his high level to play hero with a guild of noobs called the Moonlit Black Cats. Their leader, Keita, recruits our solitary protagonist, who focuses his attention on a useless girl named Sachi. She's terrified of becoming a statistic, so Kirito spends his nights lying next to her, consoling the poor girl and promising she won't die as long as he's breathing. A month later, Keita travels to buy a house for the guild, and the rest of the idiots decide to farm on the 27th floor to impress the boss. They find a secret door with a chest in the middle. Kirito smells the impending stupidity, but the guild's thief opens the chest before he can warn them. The room flashes red, blocks teleport crystals, and vomits an infinite horde of monsters. Kirito tries to hold the line but watches the entire group get massacred one by one, including Sachi, who turns into digital dust right in his face. Months later, on Christmas Eve, Kirito interrogates an information broker about a Christmas boss that supposedly drops a resurrection item. Haunted by guilt and remembering how Keita threw himself off the edge of Aincred after discovering his lie, Kirito heads to level 35. Klein and his guild show up to help, holding off a rival alliance while Kirito goes to solo Santa Claus on steroids. Our protagonist walks back dragging his feet and hands the divine prize to Klein. The big cosmic joke? The item only resurrects someone if used within 10 seconds of their death, making the entire sacrifice completely useless. Kirito goes back to his dark room to cry, until he receives a pre-recorded voice message from Sachi. The audio says her death wasn't his fault and ends with her humming Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, ensuring Kirito's Christmas trauma lasts for eternity.
Thank you. Goodbye.
A useless beast tamer named Silica throws a tantrum, abandons her party, and ends up getting lost in the woods like a toddler at the mall. After getting thrashed by a pack of drunk monkeys, her precious little flying dragon, Pina, jumps in front of an attack and becomes toast to save its master. But before the primates can do the same to her, our edgelord of darkness protagonist appears out of nowhere and saves the day. Seeing the girl cry over her pet, Kirito reveals there's a magic flower on the 47th floor capable of reviving the lizard, but she only has 3 days to get it. Back in town, they share rooms at the inn, but when Kirito knocks on her door, Silica almost answers in just her underwear, proving this game is a hazard for minors. Kirito pulls out his large magic sphere to show her the floor data, but notices a snitch listening at the door using eavesdropping skills. The next day, they reach the flower floor, dodge the aggressive greenery, and grab the item. But on the way back, the protagonist's trouble radar goes off, and they're ambushed by Rosalia, Silica's ex-teammate, who is actually the leader of a PK, Player Killer Guild, using green cursors as bait. One of the goons recognizes Kirito as the Black Swordsman, but Rosalia orders everyone to attack, thinking it's a bluff. Then we witness the greatest flex in history. Kirito just stands there taking hits to the chest while his HP bar regenerates faster than the low-level scrubs can damage him. He rubs it in their faces that his battle healing skill laughs at their pathetic DPS. Fed up with being a punching bag, he pulls out a rare crystal and warns that he's going to teleport them to prison. Then he lunges at Rosalia, threatening to cut her if she so much as makes a sound. In the end, Silica goes back to her room and uses the flower on Pina's heart, ready to tell her dragon all about how she was carried by a high-level addict. On the front lines, Vice Commander Asuna proves she's a cold, calculating psychopath by suggesting they use city NPCs as live bait to kill the boss. Our protagonist puts his foot down, pretending to have morals, but ends up sucking it up when Asuna reminds him who's boss at the meeting. Days later, the warrior princess finds Kirito slacking off and sleeping in the grass while the world ends. He makes the excuse that the virtual weather is too nice to work, and the girl, who isn't stupid, lays down next to him and passes out for 8 straight hours. To thank him for staring at her while she slept like a blinkless maniac, Asuna invites the boy to eat. But before they can swallow a bite, a scream echoes through the city. They rush to investigate and find a player hanging like a piece of meat at a butcher shop, impaled by a spear until he turns into blue glitter. The bizarre detail, they're in a safe zone where murder is theoretically impossible. Playing virtual detectives, they interrogate Yoriko, a panicked girl who was supposed to meet the victim. After taking the murder weapon to the bald Agil for analysis, they discover everything revolves around an old guild called Golden Apple. Apparently, the group found a super rare ring, voted to sell it, and their leader, Griselda, went out to sell the jewel and never came back. Yoriko swears on her life that the ghost of the betrayed leader has returned for revenge against those who voted against her. To prove the plot thickens, they call the guild's last cowardly member Schmidt for a little chat. While Yoriko cries about the ghost coming for everyone, a mysterious dagger flies through the window and stabs her in the back. Kirito rushes to look, but only has time to see the girl plummet from the second floor and disintegrate into data before hitting the ground, leaving our swordsman looking like a total chump. Our swordsman tries to play hero by chasing the hooded assassin, but the criminal pulls a teleport crystal and vanishes in the smoke while bells ring out to mask the destination. Frustrated by his own uselessness, Kirito punches the safe zone wall, while Asuna tries to calm down the cowardly giant Schmidt, who is absolutely certain the leader's ghost is out for blood. The big mystery is finally solved for the dumbest reason possible. When Kirito drops Asuna's homemade sandwich, the snack loses durability and shatters into 1,000 virtual pieces. His brilliant mind connects the dots and realizes the victims didn't lose HP, but rather their clothing's durability, using a teleport crystal the exact moment their gear broke to perfectly fake their own deaths. Meanwhile, Schmidt goes to the leader's grave to apologize and nearly has a heart attack over a rabbit before being cornered by the fake ghosts of Yoriko and Keynes. But the prank goes horribly wrong when the real psychopaths from the Laughing Coffin Guild show up to actually slit everyone's throats. Just as despair hits, Kirito arrives riding a horse out of nowhere, lies through his teeth about an army backing him up, and makes the assassins tuck tail and run. The protagonist reveals the true mastermind behind this mess is Grimlock, the dead leader's husband. Thanks to some gossip from Asuna about how married inventories are shared, they discovered the widower inherited the $1 million ring without lifting a finger. The cuckolded husband murdered his own wife just because he didn't want her personality to change in the real world, proving that the greatest danger in this game are possessive incels who refuse therapy. With the villain captured and the tears flowing, Kirito drops some cheesy lines about loving every version of your partner. He sees the ghost of the dead wife giving a thumbs up smile in the background, and Asuna takes advantage of the romantic mood to send a friend request, dragging our lone wolf back to town to swallow more virtual food. The useless blacksmith Lisbeth finishes polishing Asuna's sword and notices the vice commander is all blushed up, getting ready for a date. Ignoring the fact that Asuna has the emotional depth of a door, Lisbeth wishes her luck and goes back to hammering metal until a hobo in black clothes walks into the shop. Our useless protagonist wants a top-tier sword, but when Lisbeth hands over her masterpiece, he decides to bash his own hard iron against her weapon, shattering the girl's gear into 1,000 pieces. Humiliated by having her life's work destroyed in seconds, she demands he accompany her to the 55th floor to collect materials from a crystal-eating dragon. Reaching the frozen mountain, Kirito tells her to hide, but as soon as he cuts off the white dragon's arm, the idiot comes out of hiding thinking the danger is over. The beast breathes ice. Kirito tries to play hero, and both plummet into a deep, dark hole. Trapped in an anti-teleport trap, they accept their pathetic fate of sleeping on the frozen ground, but not before Lisbeth asks to hold his hand. The next morning, Kirito digs into the ground and discovers that the super rare ore they came for is literally dragon crap, prompting the blacksmith to hurl the crystallized poop at his face in disgust. When the beast returns to the nest, Kirito grabs the girl, runs up the ice wall, stabs the dragon in the back, and hitches an aerial ride back to freedom. In mid-air, Lisbeth confesses her love, but the wind muffles her voice because the universe hates side characters. Back at the shop, she forges the dark repulsor and tries to confess again, but Asuna invades the place looking for her boyfriend. Realizing the vice commander has already laid claim to the protagonist's sword, Lisbeth cries her eyes out in the street until Kirito shows up to console the friend-zoned blacksmith with a generic promise to beat the game. After killing a giant lizard, our antisocial protagonist finds a rare rabbit that drops a legendary piece of meat. He rushes to Agil's shop to try and sell sell this miracle, but the bald mercenary wants to taste that meat at all costs. By pure plot convenience, Asuna shows up perfectly on time, reveals she maxed out her cooking skills, and agrees to cook the rabbit in exchange for half the meal. Kuradil, the bodyguard with the face of a bitter incel, tries to stop the outing by insulting Kirito, but Asuna tells the flunky to shut up and drags the protagonist to her place. While the vice commander prepares the system-simulated rabbit stew, Kirito just sits there like a total freeloader. After swallowing her hot meat, Asuna demands they party up again, and when the idiot tries to refuse, she threatens him with a butter knife until he caves and accepts the partnership. The next morning, Kirito waits at the meeting point with the energy of a depressed zombie until Asuna comes sprinting out of the teleporter straight at him. In a clumsy attempt to push the girl away, his hand lands directly on her left breast, resulting in a panoramic flight across the field thanks to the punch he takes to the face.
What is this thing? Squishy.
The reason for her flight was Kuradil, who arrives foaming with jealousy and challenges Kirito to a duel to prove he's the alpha male. Kirito takes the first move and humiliates the bodyguard by shattering his weapon in a single hit with his sonic leap. The loser tries to escalate by pulling a dagger, but Asuna disarms the pathetic man and fires him on the spot, while the leader of the Laughing Coffin Guild watches the whole circus from the shadows. Free of the parasite, the couple explores the Floor 74 labyrinth, peeking through the boss door only to find a giant demon called the Gleam Eyes staring into their souls. Facing a giant demon armed with a sword the size of a utility pole, the two brave heroes do the only sensible thing. They run away screaming for their lives. Hiding in a safe zone, Asuna starts questioning why the protagonist never uses a shield, suspecting he's hiding a much larger tool under his coat. Before the interrogation goes any further, Klein and his guild of extras barge in. When Klein tries to hit on Asuna, he gets a punch to the gut from our jealous protagonist. The party ends when the suit and tie clowns from the army guild march into the room, led by an arrogant commander demanding map data for free. Kirito hands over the map and warns them they'll die if they enter the boss room, but the commander ignores the warning and leads his suicide squad straight to the slaughter. A few minutes later, screams of despair echo down the hall. The army is being shredded by the blue demon, and teleport crystals aren't working, triggering our black-clad swordsman's war trauma. When Asuna tries to play hero and gets tossed aside, Kirito realizes he can't hide his secret anymore. He asks them to hold the beast, invokes his second thick black sword, and activates the broken skill he pulled out of thin air, unleashing an insane combo of slashing hits. Even after taking a beating like a punching bag and nearly hitting 0 HP, the protagonist finishes the job by driving his sword straight into the demon's vitals, destroying the monster before passing out from mental exhaustion.
Is it over?
When he wakes up, he gets a desperate hug from Asuna and finds out the army's stupidity cost 3 lives. The next day, gossip about a madman soloing the boss with 2 swords spreads faster than a plague, forcing Kirito to hide in Agil's shop, where Lisbeth takes the chance to mock him. But peace is short-lived. Asuna brings bad news and Kirito is dragged to meet Heathcliff, the absolute leader of her guild. The Supreme Suit challenges our protagonist to a duel. If Kirito wins, Asuna gets time off, but if he loses, he becomes the guild's newest little lapdog. Our edgy protagonist decides to measure swords with Heathcliff, the nut job with the impenetrable shield who has never seen his own HP bar turn yellow. The arena fills with loiterers to watch Kirito unleash a frenzied dual blade combo, but Heathcliff simply turns on his admin hacks, moves his shield at light speed, and hits our emo boy in the shoulder, winning the duel on the first hit. Now forced to wear the guild's tacky white uniform, Kirito is sent to a training camp with Godfrey and the #1 yandere fan, Kuradil. At lunchtime, Kuradil gives them spiked water. Godfrey and Kirito end up more paralyzed than your love life, and Kuradil takes the opportunity to slice the leader with a sadistic psychopath's grin, revealing he's a member of the Laughing Coffin Murder Guild, and detailing his plan to kill the protagonist and pretend it was a training accident. Just as Kirito is accepting death's embrace, Asuna arrives flying like a terminal velocity meteor, heals her simper, and thrashes Kuradil until the stalker begs for mercy. But because Because anime protagonists have negative IQ, she hesitates. Kurodil tries a sneak attack, so Kirito sacrifices his own hand to block the hit and uses martial arts to penetrate deep into the villain's stomach, turning him into digital dust. Asuna starts crying, thinking she's a burden, but Kirito shuts her up with a kiss and says he wants to spend the night together. Reaching her house, the girl gets the message, turns off the light, and strips down, ready to let him play with his other sword. The virgin protagonist panics, explaining he just wanted to cuddle, taking a humiliating punch to the face for being a scrub. The next morning, to make up for the immeasurable shame, he simply asks her to marry him. The newlywed lovebirds take a vacation from the guild to play house on the 22nd floor. During a walk in the woods, the protagonist carries Asuna on his shoulders, but flees in terror when he sees other players fishing, proving his social anxiety is bigger than any boss in the game. Trying to set a campfire mood, he tells a ghost story until the two stumble upon a pale little girl wandering in the brush who simply faints in front of them. Instead of calling Aincred's Child Protective Services, they take the cursor-less child to their couch. The next day, the girl wakes up with amnesia, says her name is Yui, and after 2 minutes of talking, starts calling the teenagers daddy and mommy. Accepting teen parenthood like two irresponsible kids, they adopt her on the spot and spend lunch torturing the girl with a super spicy sandwich just to laugh at Asuna's reaction. Deciding to pretend they are functional adults, they take their new daughter to the first floor to look for her real parents. The place is more abandoned than your gym membership in February, but they soon hear screams. Reaching the plaza, they find a woman trying to defend a pack of brats against the mall cops of the Army Guild, who are basically charging income tax on children. Asuna wastes no time and humiliates the tax collector leader, using the safe zone system's recoil to make the guy nearly vomit his organs. Suddenly, the adopted daughter starts having a bizarre panic attack, muttering about hearts and screaming that she came from a much darker place. The girl's digital brain hits a blue screen of death, she faints again, and the parents of the year are left standing there with blank stares, having no idea what they just summoned. After their adopted daughter's brain hits a blue screen of death, the happy family has breakfast in a makeshift orphanage on the first floor. Peace is short-lived when the army's useless second-in-command shows up begging for help. Apparently, that cactus-headed moron Kibao staged a coup and locked his own boss, Thinker, in a secret dungeon without any gear, proving that the politics in this game are an absolute joke. The whole squad heads down to the dungeon, Kid included, because leaving her in a safe zone would be far too logical for this script. On the way, the protagonist amuses himself by slaughtering giant frogs and suggests Asuna swallow their slimy meat for dinner, causing the girl to gag and toss the trash away. When they finally find Thinker trapped in a safe zone, an absurdly high-level hidden boss called the Fatal Scythe emerges from the shadows looking like pure nightmare fuel. The power couple tries to tank the beast, but they take a colossal hit that shreds half their HP in one go, slamming them into the ground like sacks of trash. Just as the Reaper is about to slice the protagonist into ribbons, Yui simply walks up to the monster, blocks the scythe with an immortal object shield, and pulls a giant flaming sword out of thin air, vaporizing the boss using admin privileges. The brat reveals she's not a traumatized orphan, but an AI counseling program that was blocked by the system itself, forced to watch everyone's despair until she became obsessed with our smiling little couple. But since the game hates happiness, the Cardinal system detects the cheat and begins deleting the girl from existence. While Asuna cries a river, Kirito pulls an IT degree out of his pocket, hacks the console at light speed, and converts his daughter into a necklace crystal, downloading the kid to his Nerve Gear's local storage to bypass the Matrix. Our useless protagonist takes a vacation from the death game to go fishing with an old-timer who is completely amazed to experience and swallow Asuna's salty dark sauce. Together, they pull the King of Lakes from the depths, but Asuna obliterates the giant fish with her own blade, losing her cloak in the process and being surrounded by a herd of virtual simps dying for a piece of her. Before Kirito can join the autograph signing orgy, Heathcliff sends a message, killing the mood and demanding they return to the front lines immediately. After giving the old fisherman some cheap motivational advice about returning to the real world, the couple arrives at the base. Heathcliff reveals that 10 idiots entered the floor 75 boss room and were erased from existence because the room locked down, preventing them from using teleport crystals. Kirito tries to play the coward and suggests running away to live in the digital woods, but Asuna rubs reality in his face, reminding reminding him that their real bodies are rotting in hospital beds, and they need to beat this piece of junk before the machines are unplugged. At the dungeon entrance, the gang gathers and Kirito even mocks Egil, saying he won't need to carry any loot from this fight. Heathcliff opens the portal, and they enter a completely empty room, but Asuna hears a snake rattle from the ceiling, and suddenly the Skull Reaper drops on them, a bizarre skeletal centipede with giant scythes.
It's the Skull Reaper.
The beast obliterates two high-level extras with a single strike, leaving everyone paralyzed with fear. The monster tries to slice another useless, crying player, but Heathcliff and Kirito block the attacks while their health bars scream for help. Egil takes a violent tail whip and almost kicks the bucket along with two other players who were turned into floor puree. Now, the frontline trinity must hold the beast's brutal aggro in close quarters, while the rest of the squad tries to scratch the sides of this skeletal aberration. The demonic centipede finally turns to dust, but 14 players went straight to a wooden casket in the process. While everyone weeps in despair imagining the next 25 floors, Kirito notices that Heathcliff hasn't broken a single drop of sweat. In a sudden psychotic break, he attacks his own guild leader, but his blade slams into a purple system shield, revealing an immortal object. Our useless protagonist puts the pieces together and exposes Heathcliff in front of everyone as Akihiko Kayaba. With zero shame, Akihiko confesses he planned to be the 100th floor final boss just to humiliate everyone at the climax. He paralyzes all the angry extras with a menu click and offers Kirito a deal, a one-on-one duel with the immortality system turned off. If Kirito wins, the game ends. Ignoring Asuna's desperate crying, he accepts the bet, asking only that Akihiko prevent her from committing suicide if he turns into sliced ham. The fight starts at insane speeds and Kirito panics, unleashing a 27-hit combo that Akihiko defends while laughing at his own code. Kirito's sword shatters like glass, and just as the boss is about to deliver the final blow, Asuna completely ignores the laws of the system, bypasses the paralysis, and throws herself in front of him, swallowing the villain's thick blade and vanishing from the game. Completely broken inside, Kirito gives up on life and takes a sword to the chest willingly, but because the script loves this kid to a sickening degree, he refuses the death screen, holds his HP at absolute zero, and shoves Asuna's sword into Akihiko's gut, killing the god of the game before turning into polygons. Couple wakes up magically floating in the sky while the world collapses. Akihiko appears out of nowhere, says he doesn't even remember why he locked 10,000 people in this asylum, says congrats, and bails. Kirito and Asuna reveal their real names, share a final kiss, and evaporate. In the real world, Kazuto wakes up in a hospital bed looking like a malnourished skeleton. He rips out the IVs, grabs a pole for support, and crawls down the hallway like a decrepit zombie to find his girlfriend. 2 months have passed since the death game ended, but Kazuto still wakes up choking on his own tears after having nightmares about his missing waifu. Trying to prove he's not just a sedentary failure in need of physical therapy, he challenges Sugu, his younger sister, to a kendo duel in the family dojo. He takes a humiliating whack to the head, but Sugu is spooked by the malnourished kid's bizarre speed. The moment goes from intense to absolutely pathetic when Kazuto tries to sheath his wooden sword behind his back in an imaginary movement, forgetting he no longer has a giant scabbard hanging off him. He goes to the hospital to visit Asuna, who is one of 300 players still in a coma, because the plot demands more suffering. There he meets Sugo, a preppy guy with a cheap villain face who, as soon as Asuna's father leaves, reveals his true self by sniffing the coma girl's hair like an absolute pervert. This maniac tells him with a straight face that his company runs the servers now, that he's marrying Asuna next week while she's literally in a vegetative state, and has the audacity to tell Kazuto not to show up at the wedding. Destroyed by the idea of being cucked by a disgusting suit, Kazuto goes home and breaks down crying in his dark room like a baby. Sugu goes to comfort the poor guy and lies down next to him in the same bed, which would be terribly weird if a convenient flashback didn't reveal they are actually cousins, fueling that forbidden fantasy the show secretly wants you to enjoy. The next morning, Sugu wakes up in her cousin's nest and runs down the hallway, blushing with impure thoughts. While Kazuto tries to pick up the pieces of his dignity, his computer pings with an email from Egil containing a suspicious image. In it, a girl identical to Asuna appears locked inside a giant golden bird cage, proving that our protagonist's humiliation is far from over. Our traumatized protagonist visits the jacked bald guy at the cafe who casually shows him a new game about flying fairies where player killing is legal. The bald guy shoves a blurry photo of Asna trapped in a birdcage atop a giant tree in his face, and our hero's brain finally connects the dots to that preppy executive. He steals the game and rushes home. Meanwhile, his sister is in her room crushing her own thighs thinking about the protagonist, but almost chokes to death on a piece of bread when he bursts in. After giving her some juice so she doesn't go to the base, he puts the brain fryer on his head and enters the fairy game. He chooses the Goth and Black race and is dropped into the map from an absurd height, landing face first like a sack of potatoes. When he opens the menu, he realizes the coding gods recycled the previous game's code, leaving him with broken stats at level 1. He ignores the corrupted junk in his inventory, pulls out a crystal, and summons his virtual daughter, who magically transforms into a luxury pocket pixie. While he's learning to fly using an invisible game controller, our pocket pixie detects trouble. A busty blonde named Lifa and her simp-in-waiting are fleeing from a group of red lizards. The simp dies trying to be useful, leaving the blonde surrounded and about to be mugged. But with perfect timing, our protagonist falls from the sky right into the middle of the bullying circle. He tells the guys to get lost, catches a spear with his bare hand, and impales an enemy through the middle before turning and asking who's next to taste his blade. The leader of the red lizards realizes he's not the anime's protagonist and bails to avoid death penalties, leaving the blonde alone with our hero. He immediately gives her the "I saved the princess" talk and demands a hug, but the pocket pixie jumps out of his shirt and warns that only the official wife has a free pass to touch him. The blonde finds the lost goth amusing and introduces herself as Lifa, offering to buy him a drink in her town in exchange for the help. She teaches the protagonist how to fly without the invisible controller, and he immediately takes off like an unguided rocket. After laughing at his idiot face while he tries to brake, the two fly to the city, where he proves his flight skills by slamming his face directly into a brick tower. The resurrected simp shows up acting jealous, thinking he's a spy, but the blonde ignores the poor guy completely and drags our hero to the bar. There, she explains the game's mission impossible: reach the top of the giant tree, filled with invincible guards to gain unlimited flight. The protagonist says he's in a hurry to climb that damn tree to save his sweetheart, so the blonde decides she'll guide him the next day. Sugu wakes up in the real world, red as a tomato, while in-game, our hero sleeps hugging his virtual daughter, promising the happy family will return. At the top of the tree, the perverted executive harasses Asna, calling her weird fairy tale names and trying to rip her blouse off. He confesses his cliché villain plan to control brains and leaves the girl there. But Asna glares at the guy while he types the gate password, only to break down crying, begging the protagonist to hack the server. In the real world, Sugu brushes off her simp friend and rushes into the game to guide her new virtual crush. Our hero takes advantage of the local economy and buys a gigantic black sword that compensates for a lot of things before they head to the city elevator in search of the top of the world. There, they are stopped by an arrogant elf, her guild leader, who throws a tantrum saying she can't abandon their little clique. Our protagonist doesn't take it sitting down and tells him that people aren't inventory items, which almost starts a bar fight if the preppy guy wasn't afraid of ruining his image by hitting a gearless newbie.
I don't give a damn about you buzzing around my party members. But if you think you can steal them, then that's another story.
On the tower balcony, the pocket pixie gives the hero a kiss on the cheek to soak up the hater energy, leaving the blonde perplexed by the AI's weirdness. The schoolboy simp appears again just to ask the protagonist to look after his girl before vanishing to do some useless detective work, and our hero doesn't miss the chance to tease the blonde about having a jealous fan club chasing her. Meanwhile, in the golden cage, the pervert villain continues to push his luck with Asna. He tries to throw it in her face that the real-world protagonist is crying in the fetal position and wouldn't have the guts to enter a game again. But the shot backfires, and the girl gets a surge of energy just knowing her boyfriend is still breathing. With renewed morale, she spies through the mirror and records the gate password the idiot typed in. Flying across the map, the dynamic duo has to land because fairy wings have a battery limit. They take turns logging off to use the bathroom in real life. Sugu makes her brother a sandwich, realizing she's starting to want to pounce on her own relative. Back in the game, our hero senses danger in the air, and the blonde reveals the existence of virtual spies in the form of animals. They take off, unaware that a gossip bat is already broadcasting their location straight to a salamander ambush. Diving into the dark corridor of Legru, our protagonist and his adopted little sister activate night vision so they don't trip over their own incompetence. While they chatter about spells, the pocket AI warns that 12 extras attackers are approaching. Leafa casts a concealment spell, but a gossip-loving red bat almost gives them away. She quickly deduces they are bloodthirsty salamanders and tells Kirito to run, but running doesn't give XP. Reaching a lake, a stone wall sprouts from the ground, blocking their path. Kirito tries the diplomacy of violence, but the enemy's shield and healer formation is more impenetrable than his virginity. Leafa, accepting defeat, suggests they just die and respawn at the checkpoint, but the boy in black refuses to let any woman in his party go to base. In a desperate tactic, Yui tells Leafa to spend all her mana tanking a fireball, giving Kirito time to cast his edgy boy illusion. The kid transforms into a freaking copy of the Gleam Eyes, the blue-eyed boss from the previous game, and begins shredding the front line like wet paper. He rips, crushes, and chews the enemies in a bloody banquet, leaving only 2 survivors. The leader panics, jumps into the lake, and becomes food for mutant fish. The last mage refuses to talk, but Kirito simply bribes the guy with the items he just looted from the mage's dead friends. The mercenary spills everything, revealing that they were the targets, and that a salamander army is marching north. Reverting to normal, Kirito confesses he loved the taste of virtual burnt flesh and bites Leafa's hand, earning a well-deserved slap for being a total weirdo. Leafa logs out quickly to demand answers from her friend in real life. Sugu's friend reveals that the trash tier Sigurd betrayed the Sylphs and that a massive attack will wipe out the leaders during a peace treaty. Back in the game, she suggests Kirito become a mercenary for the villains, but the hero has too many principles for that. Ignoring logic, he grabs the girl and sprints through the cavern at absurd speeds to play the national savior once again, flying like 2 unguided missiles. The dynamic duo realizes they have only 20 minutes to prevent a political massacre. The GPS Pixie warns that nearly 70 salamanders are about to swallow the diplomats in 50 seconds. Leafa tries to play the martyr by telling Kirito to head for his objective, but our protagonist prefers a dramatic entrance. He lands right in the middle of both factions, demanding everyone put away their plastic knives. Bluffing with the confidence of a loan shark, Kirito declares himself an ambassador for a made-up alliance and threatens to start a world war. The enemy commander, General Eugene, laughs at the hobo in black and challenges him to survive 30 seconds against him. Eugene pulls out the demonic sword Graham, which has the annoying ability to pass through blocks like a cheating ghost, slamming Kirito into a cliff face. Ignoring the 30-second rule, the general decides the fight is to the death. Kirito takes a beating from all sides, so he throws a cowardly smoke bomb, steals Leafa's katana, and does what he does best: pulls the dual blades skill out of his absolute ass. With one blade blocking and the other attacking, he cancels out Eugene's cheat and slices the strongest player in the game with the speed of a blender on high. The leader, Sakuya, revives the defeated general, who miraculously buys the Alliance lie thanks to an extra who wanted to pay back a debt to Kirito. The salamanders retreat with their tails between their legs. Sakuya then pulls a magic mirror from her inventory just to humiliate and banish the traitor Sigurd on livestream. Kirito confesses the alliance was pure fan fiction, but the leaders are so enchanted, they start throwing themselves at him. The kid turns down the VIP invites, tosses a bag of gold in their faces to help with the mission, and bails. Leafa leans on him all needy, but Yui pops up to snitch that the protagonist's heart was racing while the leaders were rubbing up against him. He gives a lame, tough guy excuse and flies off, while high above, Asuna finally types in the prison password and escapes the cage, ready to cause trouble. Arriving at the majestic city of Arun, the system warns that the server is going down for maintenance, forcing everyone to go touch grass in real life. Leafa suggests a hotel, but Kirito is completely broke after donating all his cash to impress those guild leaders. It's up to Yui to find the cheapest dump on the map. Meanwhile, the prisoner Asuna plays spy and invades a bizarre experiment room. She finds dozens of holographic brains undergoing mental torture and discovers that her psychopathic fiancé's plan is to control everyone's minds.
Expanding the brain's control regions, one could influence a person's thoughts, emotions, and memories.
Before she can do anything, 2 gross, slimy slugs enter the room. In the real world, Kazuto wakes his sister by throwing cold water on her back, proving he's a sociopath inside and outside the game. Sugu demands sweets as an apology, but he mentions he's visiting his coma girlfriend at the hospital. The sister asks to go along, diving headfirst into a sea of confused, incestuous feelings. Back in the game, Asuna finds the control panel and tries to log out but is grabbed by the mollusk scientists. One of the slugs tries to turn the anime into a questionable tentacle but Asuna sinks her teeth into the beast, which forgot to turn on its pain filter. Unfortunately, the escape fails. The password is changed, and she's tossed back into the birdcage. At the hospital, Sugu stares at her rival's comatose body, praises her beauty, and falls into a heavy existential crisis about wanting to date her own cousin. As soon as the server comes back online, Leafa breaks down crying on Kirito's shoulder at the inn, trying to drown her real-world sorrows in the virtual chest of the guy who rejected her without even knowing it. Recovered from the emotional breakdown, the troupe walks to the base of the world tree. Leafa explains that flying to the top is literally impossible because the devs put up a ridiculous invisible barrier. But as soon as Yui scans the area and warns that Asuna is trapped up high, Kirito's brain shuts off completely. Ignoring physics, game rules, and common sense, he takes off like a heat-seeking missile straight for the barrier, leaving Leafa looking like a fool down below. Our swordsman in black decides to headbutt the world tree's invisible ceiling repeatedly, like a fly trapped against a window. Leafa literally has to pull this maniac's arm to get him to stop humiliating himself. High above, the useless prisoner hears her virtual adopted daughter's voice, and realizing that screaming doesn't help, throws an admin access card from the top, hoping gravity does its job. Kirito catches the piece of magic plastic and decides to play the lone hero. He tells Leafa to stay back, enters the base dome, and flies straight for glory. The only problem is that the developers created a colossal meat wall of Guardian Knights. While our edgelord protagonist tries to slice his way through while having dramatic flashbacks of his girlfriend, he gets turned into a human pincushion. Arrows and swords fly from every direction until his health bar hits 0. Transforming the once invincible black swordsman into a mere floating orb of light. Absolute humiliation. His fantasy of being the most broken player on the server evaporates until Leafa invades the arena, dodges everything, grabs the glowing ball that's left of the protagonist, and escapes. Outside, she resurrects the loser and decides it's the perfect moment to dump all her love on him. But when Kirito kills the mood by saying he needs to save Asuna, the penny finally drops. Leafa's brain short-circuits as she realizes she was trying to get with her own brother. In the real world, Sugu wakes up crying rivers of incestuous tears. When Kazuto knocks on the door thinking the problem was his VR addiction, she throws all her frustration in his face, revealing that she tried to forget her brother by falling for an avatar who, in the end, was Kazuto himself. A cycle of insuperable shame. The kid stands there with a blank face while she slams the door, leaving both immersed in a sea of regret and family awkwardness. Trying to fix the chaos in the family tree, Kazuto drops a philosophical monologue about how the real and virtual worlds are the same thing before promising to wait for his little sister back in the game. Sugu swallows her pride, enters ALO, and runs into Raycon, the ultimate simp. Thinking this is the perfect moment to strike, the boy confesses his love and tries to steal a kiss, only to be rewarded with a punch to the face that sends him rolling down the stairs like a sack of potatoes. Freed from the nuisance, Leafa finds Kirito, and they decide to resolve the family trauma the most sensible way, by trading blows in the sky. But mid-flight, they both give up the fight, drop their swords, and hug in a freefall, with Kirito admitting he doesn't know how to handle reality until he wakes his sleeping princess. With the vibes slightly less weird, Raycon miraculously reappears to be the cannon fodder of the hour at the World Tree. The Wonder Trio enters the Dome of Death. When the infinite swarm of Guardian Knights begins focusing on the healers, Raycon decides his life has no value and uses a self-sacrifice spell. He literally explodes like a romantic suicide bomber to blast a hole in the crowd of enemies. Kirito runs through the opening, but the game laughs in his face and vomits even more armored monsters in his path. When all seems lost, an army of pointy-eared fairies led by Sakuya and Alicia invades through the ceiling. They decided to pay Kirito back, mostly because he acted like a true sugar daddy by funding all their guild's war preparations. With the cavalry's help, Leafa tosses her sword to Kirito, who uses the power of holding 2 pieces of metal at once to tear through the remaining enemies and reach the summit. Reaching the final door, they discover the admins locked the passage, proving the entire quest was a bad joke. Fortunately, Yui grabs the card Mommy threw from above, hacks the door, and tells our hero to enter the villain's lair. Our protagonist and his pocket-sized mascot finally reach the upper branches, only to discover that the long-awaited floating city is nothing more than a cardboard set. The entire quest was a lie. Just like the developer's dignity, they find the cage and reunite with Asuna in a sappy hug. But just as Yui tries tries to disconnect her, the floor decides to swallow everyone whole. Fairy King Oberon, also known as the creepiest groom of the year, appears, conjuring gravity magic that leaves our swordsman face-planting and kissing the floor. The villain reveals that the entire game is just a test lab for mind control, because apparently, regular megalomania wasn't enough. To rub salt in the wound, he suspends Asuna in chains and starts sniffing her hair like a rabid dog in heat. Oberon kicks Kirito, impales him with a sword, and cranks the system's pain absorption down to 0. Our hero accepts defeat like a total wimp until Kayaba's ghost invades his mind to give a motivational speech ripped straight from a cheap self-help book. Fueled by pure, unadulterated plot armor, Kirito stands up, breaks the laws of physics, and uses Kayaba's own admin ID to hijack the villain's powers. He disables Oberon's cheats, summons the legendary Excalibur, tosses the sword to the villain like he's taking out the trash, and reduces Oberon's pain absorption to absolute 0. Since Oberon has the combat skills of a potato, Kirito plays butcher. He lops off the guy's arm, slices his legs, tosses his head into the air, and skewers his eye like a shish kebab, deleting the pervert once and for all. After breaking his princess's chains and promising they'll do all sorts of things in the real world, Kirito logs her out. Kayaba's ghost reappears just to hand over a glowing file called The Seed and vanishes. Our hero wakes up, quickly makes peace with his traumatized little sister, grabs his bike, and pedals desperately through the snow toward the hospital, praying he doesn't catch pneumonia before seeing his girlfriend. But before he can see his beloved, the king of virtual creeps, Sugo, ambushes him in the parking lot and slashes Kazuto's arm with a knife. The villain cries like a baby, furious because the protagonist turned off his pain inhibitors in-game and sliced him to bits, making the poor loser feel the blade on his real skin. Kazuto tries to take the moral high ground, but Sugo wants blood and tries to stab him. However, his eye is still glitching from the virtual damage. He misses, and Kazuto flips the script. The protagonist slams the human trash against a car, holds the knife to his throat, and almost embraces his inner killer, but decides the jerk is only good for a jail cell and leaves his unconscious body for the cops. In the hospital room, Kazuto pulls back the curtain and finally finds Asuna. They hug, they kiss, and they reveal their real names as if they hadn't spent 2 years playing Virtual House, while their avatars wave from the window and fade away. Months later, the lovebirds are flirting in the courtyard of a school tailor-made for VR-traumatized teens. While Kazuto and Asuna rub their relationship in everyone's faces, Lisbeth is drinking a tall glass of Hater A-Day in the cafeteria, cursing the day she gave her friend a 1-month head start to steal her crush. We find out that the creator of it all fried his own brain to become a human flash drive on the internet, while Sugo confessed to his crimes and freed the 300 test subjects to save the gaming industry, which was literally dead. Our protagonist hands Kayaba's program to Egil, who spreads The Seed online for free, resurrecting VR gaming. ALO returns from the dead, and Leafa is flying sadly through the sky until she's grabbed by the protagonist, who drags her toward a massive floating castle. The whole gang of rejects is reunited in the sky, ready to storm the new version of Aincrad because apparently nobody values their own life and they just have to clear the game all over again. 1 year after the end of the Death game, the new craze is a bar full of mercenaries in Gun Gale Online, where everyone watches a TV program fawning over a tournament winner. The guy is on screen bragging about how brute strength is all that matters for handling heavy weapons, completely ignoring agility. But the arrogance show is interrupted when a cloaked edgelord stands up in the middle of the bar, pulls out a pistol, and shoots the television. At that exact moment, the player on screen has a heart attack and disconnects straight into the afterlife, proving that this Death Gun character has figured out how to kill people via Wi-Fi. While the police do nothing, our protagonist and his girlfriend are on an otaku date at the Imperial Palace, wearing the exact same colors as their avatars like an insufferable couple. Kazuto philosophizes about the difference between real and virtual data while hiding the real reason he's being so reflective. 4 hours earlier, he was bribed in a fancy cafe by a government suit named Kikuoka. The agent drops a bizarre theory. A ghost cosplayer shot a TV and caused a fatal cardiac arrest in a pro player, mentioning a second victim under the exact same conditions. Kazuto thinks the idea of dying from an on-screen shot is the stupidest thing he's ever heard and tries to bail.
We just agreed it wasn't, didn't we? Besides, this Death Gun guy is only going after specific targets. They have to meet his criteria.
Criteria?
Uh-huh.
but he sits right back down as soon as he finds out he's getting paid to investigate. He accepts the job of becoming human bait, ready to dive headfirst into a hornet's nest of snipers. Back at the date, Kazuto keeps his secret and changes the subject, planning a friendly picnic before the scene cuts to the world of guns, where Sinon is already aiming her massive rifle, ready to blow the brains out of anyone who crosses her path. Diving into the past, we discover how Sinon found the love of her life in the form of a colossal sniper rifle. After falling into a hole like a blind mole, she came face to face with a giant boss, but realized the beast couldn't reach the corner where she was hiding. She spent 3 long hours sniped the monster's weak point like a coward, securing her precious Hecate 2. 3 months later, Sinon is in a trench in the middle of nowhere, waiting to ambush a group of monster hunters with a PvP squad, led by the useless Dine. When the targets arrive, Sinon spots a guy in a cloak and begs to pop his head first. Dine, with his non-existent tactical intelligence, tells her to focus on the obvious target with the light machine gun. She obeys, fires, and the cloaked guy immediately reveals he was the real monster, pulling out an absurd minigun and turning Dine's squad into Swiss cheese. The armored giant smiles while spitting endless lead, and Sinon decides she has to kill this psychopath to prove she's stronger. While the hail of bullets destroys everything, Dine suggests logging out and running like a rat, but Sinon humiliates him until he remembers he has a backbone. He goes for a kamikaze attack, hurling a grenade and paying with his own life just to open a small window of opportunity. Sinon doesn't waste a second. She leaps from the top of a building and enters the line of fire. She loses a leg mid-air but uses the stump to propel herself exactly into the brute's blind spot, lining up her sights perfectly and delivering an aerial headshot that clears the map for good. While the girl makes it rain blood in the shooter, over in the fairy world, the girls ignored by the protagonist continue farming items. The protagonist, nestled beside his girlfriend on the grass, finally musters the courage to tell her he's ditching the swords and colorful fairies to go play with guns in the world of psychopaths. After leaving school, Shino is cornered by generic extras demanding a 10,000 yen toll to let her go home. Since she has a functioning IQ, she refuses their pathetic offer. The bully makes a finger gun gesture, triggering Shino's PTSD and causing her to have a panic attack in the middle of the street. Fortunately, her friend Kyoji pretends to call the cops and scares off the low-rent delinquents. At a cafe, Kyoji whines about how his parents are forcing him to study medicine, and in a supreme simp move, begs to walk her home every day. Shino completely ignores his ulterior motives and friend-zones him without blinking. At home, Shino tries to hold a toy gun to test her shock therapy, but ends up puking in the toilet. Her mind drifts to a dark flashback from when she was 11. A smelly robber tried to knock over the bank she was in and threatened her mother. What would a normal kid do? Cry. What did Shino do? She bit the thug's hand, grabbed his gun, and emptied the mag into the guy's stomach, shoulder, and head without mercy. The look of horror on her mother's face as she watched her daughter turn into a miniature John Wick caused the girl's massive trauma, forcing her to use GGO as virtual therapy in the hopes that winning a tournament will heal her broken mind. Meanwhile, our two-timing protagonist warns Asuna that he's converting his avatar to GGO. She freaks out thinking it's permanent, but buys his lame excuse that it's a government mission. At the hospital, Kirito meets Nurse Aki, who immediately starts feeling up the boy's body and tells him to strip. He lets her play with his chest, attaches the electrodes, and enters the game, while a cyber creep named Death Gun is already picking Sinon as his next victim. Upon logging into the new gun-filled world, the protagonist discovers that the system has turned him into the ultimate waifu. An incel player immediately tries to buy his account for 5 million credits, but Kirito declines and wanders through the city looking for the tournament to lure out Death Gun. Completely lost, he asks for directions from the first person he sees, who just happens to be Sinon. Believing she's helping a defenseless newbie, Sinon adopts the girl-faced boy and takes him to the gun shop. Since our hero is dead broke, she suggests an impossible gambling game called Untouchable, where you have to dodge a hail of bullets. A guy in blue camo tries and gets humiliated in seconds. Kirito enters the arena and simply breaks the game. He runs like a psychopath, dodging all the lead, and when the shooter resorts to sci-fi lasers, he jumps over them and wins the jackpot, leaving the crowd jaw-dropped. With pockets full of dirty gambling money, he goes back to the shop. Ignoring all the massive phallic firearms, Kirito decides to buy a glorified lightsaber and a basic pistol. Trying to sheath the laser sword on his back out of pure MMO addict instinct, he nearly cuts his own body. At the firing range, he misses the target miserably, and Sinon explains that shooting isn't just pressing a button and waiting for the target to explode. With only 10 minutes left for tournament registration, Kirito rents a tricycle and speeds off like a suicidal maniac. Sinon asks where the little girl learned to drive like that, and he makes up a pathetic excuse about playing too many racing games, hiding the fact that he rides motorcycles in real life while they tear up the asphalt against the clock. After driving like a fugitive from the law, Kirito and Sinon reach the admin building with a ridiculous 5 minutes left for registration. Sinon grabs her new virtual friend's hand and drags him to the terminals. Our brave hero decides to skip filling in his real data, tossing away the chance for actual prizes just to keep his secret life intact. They discover they're in the same block and will only kill each other in the grand final. Entering the locker room to prep, Sinon wastes no time and strips in front of him down to her black underwear. Kirito's brain short-circuits as he desperately looks away. The girl tells the newbie to change too, forcing Kirito to finally show his player card and reveal he's packing a little something extra. The obvious result is the sniper's hand flying straight into our Supreme Trap's cheek. With a glowing red mark on his face, he follows a furious Sinon as she explains the tournament rules. The #1 simp, Spiegel, shows up to flirt, and Kirito makes sure to use the situation to taunt the boy, making their adventure look like a romantic date just to watch the world burn. The tournament begins, and Kirito is dropped into an ancient temple against an extra. Taking lead in the legs and shoulder right away, he remembers the bullet prediction mechanic from the casino. Activating his broken mode, he pulls out his toy lightsaber and starts deflecting bullets like a Jedi on energy drinks. He rushes the shocked enemy, fires to cancel the guy's reload, and plunges the laser sword into his chest, winning the first round. Back in the waiting room, a freak in a hobo cloak creeps up behind him, asking if he's the real Kirito. When the stranger pulls back his robe, the protagonist spots the tattoo on his arm, the mark of the Psycho Assassin Guild from Sword Art Online, proving the past always comes back to haunt the otaku. After the run-in with the villain cosplayer Sniper, our broody protagonist has a flashback to the Sword Art Online days. He remembers the crusade against the Laughing Coffin Guild, where a massacre broke out and he personally sent 2 guys to the afterlife in a fit of rage. All this trauma has him breaking out in a cold sweat until the blue-haired Sniper taps his shoulder and asks if he's okay. Like a scared little boy, he grabs her hand for comfort, leaving the girl more confused than a viewer trying to understand this game's lore. The system then teleports everyone to their next matches. Our Sniper lands in a desert against a nobody named Stinger. The guy thinks he's a strategic mastermind, sets a bait, and charges in a car like a GTA maniac trying to run her over. But the girl doesn't back down for a bad driver. She simply puts a bullet through the Jeep's window, blowing the guy's head off without mercy. Then comes the block final, pitting the swordsman against the Sniper in an exhibition duel that means absolutely nothing. However, our emo hero decides he doesn't want to fight anymore and just starts walking in a straight line like a glitched bot. This makes the girl so livid she misses every shot in a rage, walks up to him, and gives him a monumental scolding. To settle the beef, he proposes a duel from 10 meters away. She thinks it's an insta-kill, but when he drops a bullet on the ground to start the clock, hacker mode activates. He reads her eyes, slices the Sniper shot in half with his light sword, and lunges forward, grabbing the girl in a very intimate way and pressing his blade against her. Instead of taking the win, he starts a philosophical chat about killing people in the real world to protect those he loves. Realizing they both share the same virtual killer trauma, he forfeits the match because he feels weak. She accepts the free win but promises that next time, she's going to wreck his face for real. In the real world, the cousin who wants to be more than a cousin shoves a newspaper article in the protagonist's face, showing his name is in the gun tournament. He tries to play dumb, but she reveals his official girlfriend already spilled the beans. After remembering he rejected his girlfriend's help to play the lone wolf, he sees his relative worried about the psycho face he was making the night before, so he promises it all ends today. Meanwhile, our Sniper is venting about the swordsman to her simp friend, even making a finger gun gesture without having a nervous breakdown for the first time in years. The boy notices she's different, compliments everything about her, and tries to make a move with a caring hug. However, he gets blocked harder than a castle wall. She tells him to wait until the tournament is over because she's not ready for that kind of touch, leaving the kid friend-zoned and empty-handed. At the hospital, the nurse notices the protagonist looks like he's been holding it in and offers a free therapy session. He cries about slicing players in the death game. The nurse gives him a mommy hug and gives him the classic excuse that he only did it to protect others. With a clean conscience, he enters the game again. Back in the fairy world, the hero's girlfriend is so distracted thinking about virtual infidelity that she almost lets Klein die of poison in a fight against some random monster. After saving the loser at the last second, the group gets ready to watch the tournament on TV. Back in the world of guns, the sniper bumps into her simp friend again. He tries to force a romantic moment, but gets shut down again because she's focused on the battle royale. Shortly after, she runs into the emo protagonist, and the two exchange intense stares and promises that neither of them is going to lose this thing. Before entering the government office, our protagonist deduces that the villain in the skull mask has been farming XP and registered for the tournament under a fake name. To squeeze information out of the sniper, the swordsman uses the full potential of his female skin in a bar, getting a bunch of sweaty dudes to cheer for him. This leaves a vein popping in the girl's forehead from the sheer audacity of the kid. After she explains the battle royale rules, he stops her from leaving and asks about the mysterious players in the tournament. She drops 3 handles: Pale Rider, Jushi X, and Sturban. The boy finally opens his mouth and confesses he's looking for an enemy from a past game to settle scores with a blade, admitting his failure to run from responsibility. She figures out he's a Sword Art Online survivor and gulps, but immediately demands that he doesn't die to anyone but her. The tournament is in full swing, and our pocket sniper finishes off an extra before checking the satellite radar. She aims at a guy named Dine and Pale Rider, but as she settles into her shooting position, she hears a noise behind her. She tries to draw her gun, but the emo swordsman appears out of nowhere and immobilizes her from behind in a move that's a bit too close for her comfort. He tells her to stay quiet and watch the fight below. This Pale Rider guy pulls some circus acrobatics, dodges everything, and guns down Dine without breaking a sweat. But his glory is short-lived because he takes a silent shot out of nowhere. The sniper is confused about where the hero came from, and he explains he was hiding underwater like a frog to stay off the radar. At that moment, a cloaked freak steps out of the shadows holding a silenced sniper rifle. He hits the acrobat with a paralysis dart and pulls out a pistol to finish the job. Seeing the death cosplayer preparing to fire, the hero panics and screams for the sniper to pull the trigger and take the guy out once and for all. While Asuna and her fan club of slackers watch the tournament on VR Twitch, our protagonist has vanished from the cameras, probably doing something stupid. Sinon tries to cancel the cloaked guy's life, but the freak has ninja cat reflexes. He dodges, shoots Pale Rider with a pea-shooter pistol, and the guy simply disconnects from life itself. The assassin then looks straight into the camera and drops the cringiest catchphrase possible, announcing "Showtime."
It's showtime.
On the other side of the screen, Klein drops his glass as he has a Vietnam flashback, recognizing the phrase from the leader of the Laughing Coffin Psycho Guild. In the Polygon Desert, Kirito finally spills the beans and tells Sinon that the death cosplayer is sending players to the Shadow Realm in real life. Trying to play the lone hero, the swordsman tells Sinon to stay safe, but she sticks to him like a burr. A random extra tries to interrupt the couple's moment by firing at them, but Kirito deflects the bullets with his knockoff lightsaber, while Sinon puts a hole in the fool's gut. In the other fairy dimension, the possessive wife Asuna decides to log out to call the government agent and have her AI daughter hack the shooter's data. Back at the firefight, the two amateur detectives check the map and deduce the killer is a guy named Jushi X, purely because the name sounds like Death Gun, proving their brains are already melting. They storm a stadium and split up with the intelligence of horror movie protagonists. Sinon ends up taking a paralysis dart, and the real Death Gun, revealing himself as a guy named Sturban, pulls off his invisibility cloak to give his villain speech. To make the humiliation worse, he pulls out the exact same gun that caused the sniper's childhood trauma. Just as the masked edgelord is about to blow Sinon's brains out, Kirito plays the budget ninja, sniping him with a stolen rifle and popping a smoke grenade to ruin the party. Our hero grabs the girl, who is currently more frozen than a Windows 95 PC, and bolts to find a getaway vehicle. He tosses her into a beat-up buggy and tells her to shoot the mechanical horse next to them to shake the pursuit. However, the girl's brain has completely short-circuited, allowing Death Gun to mount his cyber steed and kick off a bizarre chase worthy of Mario Kart. Driving like a maniac, Kirito begs Sinon to pull the damn trigger, but she's turned into crying dead weight. Desperate, the swordsman pulls the classic move of placing his hand over hers to help help her aim. Catching a ramp in true Fast and Furious style, she finally fires. Naturally, she misses the villain, but hits a truck's fuel tank which explodes in pure Michael Bay fashion, sending the robo-horse to the junkyard and securing their escape. They hide in a cave in the middle of nowhere to dodge the satellite radar. Kirito explains that he beat the crap out of some player named Musketeer X, found out she was just a random girl, took her loot, and used it to save the damsel in distress. Sinon feels utterly humiliated to be coddled by her rival and throws a temper tantrum, claiming she'd rather die than live in fear. When she tries to march out, Kirito grabs her arm and launches into a cliché motivational speech about how dying alone is pointless. She snaps, screams that she hates him, and then her bipolarity kicks in, ending with her head resting on the protagonist's lap. She then shares her tragic backstory about sending a robber to hell at age 11, earning this complimentary trauma. Not wanting to be outdone in the drama department, Kirito plays his trap card, revealing he's also a traumatized killer from the SAO era, and that defeating Deathgun is the only way to pay for his virtual sins. The cave therapy session continues as Sinon asks how the Black Swordsman got over the guilt of slicing up humans. Kirito puts on his best armchair philosopher mask and drops the line that he never got over it. He just embraced the trauma as punishment, proving he is the true king of edgelords. Shifting to something useful, the Sherlock Holmes of anime begins to piece together the villain's puzzle. He questions why on earth Deathgun uses a small pistol to finish off victims instead of his giant rifle. The brilliant conclusion: the killer is too stupid to work alone. It's actually a duo. One otaku plays in the room while the partner breaks into the victim's house to inject lethal poison in real life. All of this was possible because the players of this moronic game typed their real addresses into a public terminal with zero privacy, allowing the villain to use his invisibility cloak to peep over their shoulders. The protagonist turns to Sinon and asks about her home security. When the girl admits she lives alone and didn't chain the door, Kirito drops the bomb that there's likely a psychopath sniffing her pants in the real world right now, just waiting for the signal to strike. The girl nearly has a heart attack on the spot, but Kirito calms her down by saying the stalker won't do anything until she gets shot in the game, which is surely very comforting.
He'll kill you, so you have to calm down.
I'm scared. I'm so scared.
Meanwhile, in the fairy world, government suit Kikuoka shows up to give Asuna some explanations. Since he's a useless procrastinator, Yui's AI has to spoon-feed them the entire Deathgun conspiracy. With blood in her eyes, Asuna demands to know the address where her boyfriend is lying down so she can track him down in the real world. Back in the virtual desert, our traumatized duo devises a genius plan where Kirito acts as suicide bait while Sinon snipes from afar. To top it off, they notice a floating camera filming them, indicating the tournament has turned into a macabre reality show and they are the main attraction. The calculating protagonist suddenly discovers he knows basic math and realizes the player count doesn't add up. There's a guy missing from the map, meaning the black-cloaked villain has more real-life henchmen than you have virtual friends. They decide to use a background character named Yamakaze as bait, but the plan quickly shifts to Kirito being the center of attention because he's completely addicted to cheap protagonism. As Yamakaze approaches, Sturban fires at Kirito, but our emo swordsman activates his spidey senses, feels the killing intent in the air, and dodges an invisible bullet, causing a pillar to collapse on the bystander. Scared witless, Yamakaze hides, only to take a bullet to the chest from Sinon, getting dispatched to the lobby without understanding a single thing about his own life. With the extra out of the way, Sinon and Sturban engage in an intense scope-staring duel, fire simultaneously, and, in a ridiculous display of anime symmetry, break each other's weapons identically. Without his giant firearm, Kirito charges in with his bootleg lightsaber, but Sturban pulls a thin sword out of his pocket, proving that nobody in this shooting game actually likes using guns. Meanwhile, in the real world, Asuna breaks into her boyfriend's hospital room and finds him sweating more than a sinner in church. Yui turns on the game screen and Asuna immediately recognizes Sturban's sword as the favorite weapon of one of the leaders of the Laughing Coffin Guild. The nurse even gives a random German lesson, revealing that Sturban isn't the name of some guy named Steve forgiven, but the literal word for to die. Back in the game, Kirito tries to play detective by threatening to expose the villain's identity, but gets a reality check when Sturban reveals the protagonist simply ignored his name in the past out of pure ego. Extremely offended by Kirito's lack of manners, the villain hits turbo mode and starts beating the boy with a speed so absurd that not even the script can protect him. While the protagonist takes a merciless beating, Sinon watches with a blank stare, since without her precision scope, she's about as useful as a fork for soup. In the real world, Asuna decides to use the inexplicable magic of love and holds her sweaty boyfriend's hand, firmly believing her body heat will somehow travel through the fiber optic connection to the game server. Inside the arena, Kirito is nearly turned into Swiss cheese when he finally uses his brain and remembers the villain has red eyes, deducing his former name with unparalleled originality, Red-Eyed Zaza. The villain is so shocked that someone in the world remembered his existence that he fumbles his strike, allowing Sinon to point an empty gun just to spook the poor guy. Sturban panics and activates his optical camouflage to vanish, but the protagonist miraculously feels the warmth of his real-world girlfriend's hand caressing his senses. This reminds him of a tiny detail. He had a pistol in his holster the whole time, and just forgot. Kirito fires into the air, short-circuiting the villain's invisibility gear and slices the guy in half. After the villain melts away, promising that it's not over, Kirito and Sinon decide to settle their rivalry like civilized people. She hands him a live grenade and gives him a tight hug, blowing them both up in a bizarre display of affection that cheats the system and secures a tie in the tournament. Back in reality, Shino arrives at her apartment to find her creepy friend Kyoji at the door. Within seconds, the nice guy goes full yandere, tries to grab her by force, and pulls out a lethal syringe. He delivers the classic failed villain monologue, revealing himself as Death Gun's accomplice, and that his grand motive for serial murder was because some random player lied about the best agility build in the game. Just as Shino is about to give up and die, she remembers the useless protagonist, finds her courage, and tries to flee. Kyoji grabs her again, but Kazuto kicks the door down like a maniac and tackles the vengeful incel, leaving Shino completely stunned as she realizes this scrawny kid was her tough-as-nails shooting partner. The protagonist tries to play the savior against the armed incel, but takes a cowardly beating, leaving his guard wide open for a lethal injection. Instead of running for her life, Shino grabs a giant boombox and smashes it over Kyoji's head, proving that a stereo can be the best blunt weapon in the world. When she checks Kazuto's body expecting to find a fresh corpse, she discovers the needleless injection magically hit a tiny hospital electrode stuck to his chest, plot armor so thick it would make a tank jealous. 2 days pass, and Shino is cornered by the same old school bullies, who try to scare her by pointing a toy gun. With the unbreakable new confidence of someone who just blew up a virtual boyfriend with a grenade, Shino snatches the gun, flips the safety, and lands a bullseye on a flying can, leaving the girls looking like clowns. She then crosses the school gates and meets Kazuto, who drags her to a cafe where a government suit dumps the largest monologue of exposition ever recorded by mankind. Apparently, the Goofy brothers stole poison and the hospital master key from their own father. One would shoot in the game while the other broke into the victim's apartment to administer the injection, with impeccable timing to make it look like sorcery. And all of this simply because the younger brother got offended that his character stats were bad. Kazuto reveals that the third accomplice is still at large and even left a dramatic message promising more chaos, but they decide to pretend that isn't their problem for now. In a bold move to play unlicensed therapist, Kazuto drags Shino to a bar where his girlfriend and the friend-zone Smithy are sipping drinks. He reveals he invaded the girl's personal life and brought the exact postal worker Shino saved during the robbery years ago. The woman thanks her profusely, reveals she was pregnant at the time, and nudges her young daughter to hand over a colorful drawing. The emotional pressure is so overwhelming that Shino breaks down in tears, finally curing all her murder complexes in the middle of a dive bar surrounded by a bunch of VR addicts. Our pair of cousins with unresolved tension are relaxing in the real world when Sugu rubs a news story in the protagonist's face about the legendary sword Excalibur being found in ALO. The protagonist's ego immediately inflates, remembering that months ago they saved a weird flying beast named Tonki, who showed them exactly where the sword was. Like a true digital hoarder, he planned to grab it later, but now that another nerd might steal his loot, panic sets in. Without wasting a second, he summons his personal harem plus the useless Klein to raid the sky dungeon of Jotunheimer. While the girls spend money at Lisbeth's shop and Yui scours the forums for mission gossip, the group prepares for the carnage. They enter the frozen land through a secret passage. Asuna casts a cold resistance spell so no one freezes their buns off, and Lifa calls her flying Uber, Tonki. The winged beast serves as a mount, but halfway there, it takes a sharp dive and hovers. Below, they witness a grotesque slaughter where stupid players are helping humanoid monsters exterminate Tonki's entire family. As they watch the friendly bloodbath, a giant woman named Urd, also known as the Queen of the Lake, sprouts up behind them to spill the local tea. The King of Giants, Threemer, threw Excalibur into her spring, froze the entire world, and now wants to annihilate the beasts to invade the land of the fairies. To stop the ice from taking over, the needy giantess hands them a tracking medallion and begs our glorified fairies to dive into the ice dungeon and yank the giant, hard sword from the bottom of the pit, kickstarting the most suicidal mission of the year. Right at the entrance of the ice palace, the family pet AI, Yui, decides to drop an anxiety bomb on everyone. She reveals that the Cardinal system generated this quest automatically, and if they fail, an apocalyptic event called Ragnarok will simply delete Alfheim and their beloved virtual prison, Aincred. With no time to cry over source code, the Suicide Squad rushes into the dungeon before the server explodes. At the end of the second floor, they run into two steroid-pumped minotaurs who love tag teaming. One is immune to magic, the other to physical damage, and they swap places to heal their wounds like cheesy PvP players. Since the group doesn't have a single decent damage-focused mage, they have to rely on sword skills that deal elemental damage but leave everyone paralyzed and vulnerable with their legs wide open after the strike. That's when our protagonist decides to break the game rules once again, revealing an absurd technique of chaining strikes with his two swords to ignore system rigidity, slicing the minotaurs like Swiss cheese. Advancing deeper, they find a random woman trapped in an ice cage. The protagonist, being a traumatized veteran, notices her health bar and concludes the prisoner is obviously a walking trap. The whole group agrees to ignore the poor woman, but Klein, whose brain is guided purely by hormones and romantic desperation, ignores all warnings and frees the lady named Freya.
Don't worry, Princess, I'm coming!
Instead of running away and saying thanks, Freya demands to join the group to recover a family treasure stolen by King Threemer. With little choice and Simp Klein drooling over the new recruit, the protagonist accepts the extra baggage. They load up on buffs, plan their strategy, and kick down the throne room door to face the King of the Frost Giants in a duel to the death. King Threemer doesn't wait for introductions and starts swinging. Our fairies fight for their lives and manage to drain the monster's health down to 2 bars. But after nearly being melted by a disgusting breath attack, Freya panics. She begs the protagonist and Lifa to find her golden family hammer in the room's pile of junk, warning it's their only chance for victory. Following the cousin's advice, the protagonist uses an electric attack to locate the toy in the mound of gold. But as soon as he returns the hammer to Freya's delicate hands, the lady undergoes a disturbing metamorphosis and transforms into a giant, muscular man, the god of thunder himself, Thor. With Threemer completely confused after being tricked by a disguised god, the group takes advantage of the distraction to dump all possible damage. Thor smashes the Frost King with his glorious hammer and, before vanishing, gives a miniature version of his hard instrument to Klein as a consolation prize. Yui warns that the mission isn't over yet, pointing to a secret staircase where the real prize awaits. The protagonist finally reaches the pedestal and yanks the legendary Excalibur from the ground with all his might, which immediately causes the entire dungeon to collapse. They start plummeting into the abyss, but the flying beast Tonki appears at the last second to save the day. The only problem is the sword is too heavy for the protagonist to hop onto the monster's back, forcing him to abandon his precious loot in midair. To everyone's surprise, Sinon pulls out her bow, uses a special arrow, and fishes the weapon back. She hands the big toy to the protagonist and drops a cheesy pickup line, telling him to think of her every time he pulls that big, thick sword from its sheath, leaving the rest of the harem seething with rage. With the land of Jotunheimer saved, the goddess Ord and her sisters appear to hand out rewards. Useless Klein tries to ask for one of the goddess's phone numbers, and gets nothing but a face full of glitter as divine rejection. Back in the real world, the nerds gather at a cafe to stuff their faces and celebrate the end of the year, while the protagonist installs ceiling cameras so Yui's AI can peep at the party in 3D. Our favorite pair of virtual trauma victims are on a date at Egil's cafe, shooting the breeze until the bald man reveals that the new ALO update will release floors 21 to 30 of New Aincred. Driven by pure real estate obsession, Asuna drags everyone on Christmas Eve to beat the 21st floor boss just so they can rush upstairs and buy the exact same log cabin where they played house in the original Death game. Moving to the beginning of the year, the girls try to focus on homework inside the cabin, while our useless protagonist spends the day snoring in a rocking chair with Yui and Pina slumped over him. Since the boy's aura of laziness was infecting the room, the girls go outside for some air, and Lisbeth decides to gossip about someone called Absolute Sword. Apparently, there's a maniac on the 24th floor challenging everyone and betting an 11-hit original sword skill, which completely humiliates General Eugene's pathetic 8-hit combo. Lisbeth admits she and Lifa already went there and got trashed by the mysterious duelist. And worse, even your favorite black swordsman lost the fight after crossing blades with them. Curious to know if the newcomer was an SAO veteran, Asuna hears the most arrogant justification possible. According to Kirito himself, Absolute Sword couldn't be from the Death game, because if they were, the system would have shoved the dual blade skill into this rookie's hands instead of his. With her ego bruised by proxy, Asuna decides it's time for her to go test the thickness of this player's blade. Logging out of the magical world to face the true final boss, Asuna sits down for dinner with her rich and insufferable mother, Kyoko. The old woman hates the virtual helmet and demands her daughter study in the real world, revealing she's hired a tutor and arranged a transfer to an elite school. When Asuna defends her current school, her mother spits back that the place is just a prison to monitor traumatized teenage killers, conveniently forgetting her daughter is one of them. To make matters worse, Kyoko makes it clear she wants to sell Asuna off in an arranged marriage to some rich kid from Kyoto, and that she's already investigated and disapproved of her relationship with the useless protagonist. Furious and feeling completely powerless in real life, Asuna storms away from the table.
Even though they're gone, you're still ashamed of Grandma and Grandpa, aren't you? You're angry you weren't born into a rich, important family.
The next day, she meets Kirito on the 24th floor. While watching the crowd fly to the dueling island, Kirito plays philosopher and says he asked Absolute Sword if they were truly living in the virtual world. The small talk is interrupted by the other girls, who push Asuna into the arena. Upon arriving, the big surprise. The invincible monster is actually a cute little girl named Yuki. Without wasting time, Asuna draws her weapon and the blade dance begins. She crosses swords with the rookie, punches her in the gut to break her guard, and activates her 4-hit skill, but Yuki blocks everything with disgusting ease and fires back with a brutal combo. Desperate, Asuna unleashes her original skill, but her strikes run out while Yuki's sword keeps coming to penetrate her defense. Prepared to swallow defeat, Asuna closes her eyes, but the girl stops the blade a millimeter from her gut. Satisfied with the sweaty play, Yuki smiles, extends a hand, and drags Asuna out of Aincred to ask for a little favor. Away from the arena, Yuki drags Asuna to a tavern and introduces her guild of unemployed losers, the Sleeping Knights. Their brilliant plan is to defeat the next floor boss, using only a group of 7 people. The reason is pure sentimental fluff. They want to etch their names on that useless stone wall of the swordsman's monument before the guild disbands at the end of winter. Asuna accepts the volunteer work but asks why Yuki didn't pick the OP protagonist for the slot. The girl's answer is that Kirito figured out her dirty little secret in the middle of their intense sword swapping session. Before the gossip can continue, Asuna is brutally disconnected by her dictator mother because she's late for dinner. After another round of family humiliation, she goes to whimper in a park and almost calls her boyfriend, but gives up to avoid looking weak. The next day, back in the game, the group strolls peacefully to the boss room. However, Asuna's radar goes off, and she realizes there are a bunch of rats hiding using spying spells to steal their strategy while peeping from afar.
Whoa, hang on, we're not here to fight you!
Then lower your weapons, now!
They go in, get trashed by the boss, die, and respawn in town. Knowing about the theft, Asna tells everyone to run back before the Guild of Leeches organizes an attack. Upon arriving, the cowards have blocked the door and claim the sleeping knights can't pass. Pure virtual elitism. Lacking patience for bureaucracy, Yuki flips her rage switch and simply charges to slice up the leader. The rest of the enemy army appears to crush the kids, but suddenly, the Black Swordsman decides it's showtime. Running up the walls like a lizard on too much caffeine, Kirito lands in front of everyone, drawing his long, thick weapon to block the path and steal the scene just like you trying to get attention on the internet. While the protagonist uses his cheap tricks to hold off the squad of extras and Klein serves as little more than a paperweight, Asna realizes the true threat is the healers. Without wasting time, she activates her flashing penetration, driving deep into the enemy backline and completely devouring their leader's health. With the supports eliminated, the rival guild is wiped off the map, allowing Asna and the sleeping knights to invade the boss room. Inside, the battle against the two-headed monster takes a bizarre turn when a flying spear hits the sensitive crystal right between the creature's chest. The boss shudders in pain from being poked in that specific spot, and Asna confirms the weakness by machine gunning ice pillars at the same area. She screams for Yuki to finish the job, and after accidentally calling Asna Big Sis in a Freudian slip, the girl uses the big guy of her own group as a human springboard. She unleashes her original skill on the monster's weak point, obliterating the creature just before the rival guild kicks the doors down, only to find the heroes flashing victory signs in their faces. During the party at the cabin, Asna tries to force a marriage with the guild, begging to join the group, but Yuki gives her the biggest reality check in history. She reveals they are finishing up soon and apologizes for befriending her, leaving the atmosphere heavier than Kirito's ego. Trying to save the social disaster, Asna drags everyone to take a photo at the swordsman's monument, but after slipping another big sis by mistake, Yuki has an emotional collapse, starts crying out of nowhere, and pulls the plug on the internet, vanishing from existence and leaving everyone standing there looking like idiots. After being ghosted for 3 straight days, Asna corners the support player from the Ghost Guild in a tavern. Shune feeds her the classic, "it's for your own good" excuse, begging Asna to forget about them before cowardly logging out before receiving an answer. In the real world, the useless protagonist finally decides to use his nerd knowledge for something other than building a harem. On the school rooftop, he hands Asna a hospital address so she can stalk her new friend, proving that privacy is non-existent in this franchise. Upon arriving at the hospital and demanding to see Yuki, Asna is dragged away by a doctor who decides to drop a surgical-grade depression bomb on her. He reveals that the upbeat girl from the game actually contracted a terminal illness at birth, lost her twin sister, and has been trapped inside a hospital-grade VR box for 3 consecutive years because her immune system simply gave up. As Asna begins to leak ocular fluid like a broken faucet, Yuki's robotic voice echoes through the machine's speakers, demanding she stop whimpering and log into the game immediately. Asna swipes a headset from the room next door and dives back into the fairyland to find the dying girl. After an intensive session of virtual therapy, Yuki reveals her last impossible dream, to go to school one more time. This sparks an idea in Asna, who decides to use the power of the plot to turn this delusion into reality. The protagonist and his AV Club buddies spend their lunch break tuning a camera mounted on a shoulder rig, effectively turning Yuki into a glorified talking iPad. Asna carries this cybernetic contraption to school, where the terminal girl reads a text in class and becomes the main attraction of the high school circus. Taking advantage of the ride, Yuki begs to visit her old home before the bulldozers turn the place into dust. Surveying the grounds, she has the brilliant idea of asking Asna to marry her, just to avoid ending up with the stupidly repetitive name Yuki Yuki. Inspired by the iPad girl's courage, Asna decides to face the scariest boss of her own life, her controlling, elitist mother. She forces the old boomer to put on the VR headset and drags her to the cabin in the middle of the Polygon Forest. There, Asna launches a devastating psychological attack, reminding her mother that her grandparents only wanted her to be happy and kept the old house alive as a safe haven. The emotional speech deals such a massive critical hit to the matriarch's psyche that she completely loses control. Since the system doesn't allow for the hiding of facial fluids, the mother collapses and begins to cry virtual waterfalls. By the next morning, the shock therapy proves perfectly effective. The mother accepts defeat and allows Asuna to stay at the school for maladjusted survivors, imposing only the condition that she doesn't get mediocre grades, proving that VR emotional blackmail is the secret to resolving any family trauma. 3 days after resolving her family drama, Asuna decides to host a virtual cookout in the woods. Midway through the barbecue, someone has the brilliant idea of beating the 28th floor boss for dessert, and the group of slackers goes out and slaughters the beast without breaking a sweat. What follows is a generic montage of happiness. Yuki going to school, fairies racing, more bosses turning into dust, and Yuki humbling Kirito in a sword tournament, proving our protagonist isn't invincible when he isn't using plot hacks. Asuna even drags the whole guild on a trip to Kyoto using Kirito's communication probe, because virtual tourism is the future. But as they say, good things don't last for the underprivileged. March arrives with a gut punch. The doctor warns that Yuki's time is running out, sending Asuna racing to the hospital in an absurd panic just to put on a VR headset in the next room and watch her friend die in high definition. On the island where they first met, Yuki passes Asuna a scroll containing her original sword skill, essentially handing over her inheritance before kicking the virtual bucket. The entire guild, Kirito's harem, and a horde of random fairies spawn out of nowhere to ensure the send-off is more crowded than a K-pop concert. Yuki finally understands the meaning of life and disconnects forever. A week later, at the funeral, the mourning is interrupted by shocking revelations. We discovered that the medical technology that kept Yuki alive was based on designs by none other than Akihiko Kayaba, the same psychopath who fried the brains of thousands of players years ago. What goes around comes around. To close out this emotional roller coaster, the whole gang gathers for a picnic, where Yui can see the real world thanks to Kirito's probe. Our useless protagonist starts philosophizing about blurring the lines between reality and gaming, decides he has a cosmic duty to watch over the future, and finally musters the courage to say he wants to be with Asuna forever. A group photo seals the moment while you cry in the shower. A year has passed, and the current trend isn't frying your brain while lying in bed, but running through the streets wearing the Ogma, AR glasses that everyone swears are totally safe. The sensation of the moment is the game ordinal scale and its virtual idol Yuna, who sings while everyone bashes invisible monsters in the middle of the mall. Kirito acts like a sedentary senior citizen who hates new technology until he has to give Asuna a motorcycle ride to hunt down old SAO bosses that have mysteriously started spawning in real life. Everything turns to chaos when a failed ex-player emo named Eiji decides to play the villain. He literally breaks Klein's arm in the real world and throws him to a boss to be chewed on, proving this game's security system is a complete joke. Worse yet, when Asuna tries to save the useless Silica from a dragon's tail swipe, she takes the hit, and her AR device magically sucks away all her memories of Sword Art Online. Motivated by not wanting to lose his star girlfriend, our protagonist finally gets off the couch and becomes the server's rank 1 player by hunting monsters in the dead of night. Guided by the hooded ghost of Yuna, Kirito discovers that the game's creator, Professor Shigemura, wants to revive his deceased daughter by scanning the minds of all SAO survivors during a live concert, which will conveniently fry the brains of thousands of teenagers. A truly exemplary father. While the stadium turns into a slaughterhouse for deluded players, Kirito beats the hell out of Eiji in the parking lot, yanks the flash drive off his neck, and dives back into virtual reality. Using the hidden hardcore mode in the glasses, the whole squad spawns in with their legendary skins to obliterate the boss of Aincred's 100th floor. Kirito gets a giant cheater sword, sweeps the monsters from the real-life concert, and saves the day. The ghost idol returns Asuna's memories before being deleted from existence, allowing the couple to finally watch a meteor shower and exchange spit and commitment rings. Meanwhile, the government simply recruits the genocidal professor to work for them instead of throwing the old man in jail. In the glorious underworld, we find two 11-year-old kids named Kirito and Yujio stuck with the worst manual labor in history, chopping down a gargantuan tree that doesn't take a scratch, proving that virtual child labor is incredibly inefficient. After their friend Alice brings them lunch and they wolf it all down before it spoils in the heat, the trio of geniuses decide decides to raid a magic cave just to get some ice. They find the remains of a dead dragon and the blue rose sword, but since they are polite children and not grave robbers like you in an RPG, they only take the ice and get lost on the way out. Obviously, they take a wrong turn and stumble upon the dark territory, getting a front row seat to an integrity knight beating down a dark knight. When the loser calls for help, Alice trips like a clumsy potato and touches a single finger to the forbidden soil, triggering the system's cosmic treason alarm. The next day, the knight appears in the village to drag Alice away for execution. Kirito tries to play the hero, but is slammed to the ground by invisible magic, while Eugeo suffers from a convenient eye pain that prevents him from doing anything. Kirito then wakes up in the real world, completely confused. We jump to a match in Gun Gale Online, where enemies log out in fear of Sinon's team. The next day, at a cafe, she recruits Kirito and Asuna for the next tournament because she can't stand losing to sweaty veterans anymore. Kirito takes the opportunity to dump an encyclopedia's worth of info regarding his new job testing the Soul Translator, a bizarre machine that injects memories directly into the human soul and erases what happened afterward. Walking with Asuna, Kirito works his charm, tells her he's going to the States to study this technology, and asks her to come along. They share a romantic kiss that is immediately ruined by a guy asking for directions. The man reveals himself to be Johnny Black, the last at-large member of the Assassin Guild. Kirito tries to fight back using a pathetic umbrella, but the villain injects a muscle relaxant directly into his chest, causing our hero to collapse with cardiac arrest in the middle of the street. Kirito wakes up in the middle of the woods, disoriented and with no memory of his sidewalk heart attack. He quickly realizes he's been dumped back into the underworld, only this time with all his real-world memories intact. Trying to solve the problem in the stupidest way possible, he screams at the developers to get him out, but he is completely ignored by the server gods. While trying not to die of thirst, he hears noise and finds a blonde boy chopping the same damn tree from before. Not knowing if the boy is a real player or just a generic NPC, Kirito chooses his words carefully. The boy doesn't understand a single bit of gamer slang, revealing himself to be a grown-up Eugeo still stuck with the useless task of felling the indestructible tree. Eugeo offers some stale bread as a courtesy and drops the drama about how his friend Alice was taken in the past, proving the boy is in desperate need of therapy. Attempting to pay for the snack, Kirito offers to help chop the tree, discovering the hard way that manual labor without cheat stats is hell. After the exhausting shift, the duo marches to the village, where they are stopped by Zinc, an arrogant guard who loves bullying woodcutters. Kirito decides to lie and say he's a swordsman. Upon grabbing a wooden sword, he accidentally triggers a system skill, leaving the guard jaw-dropped and our protagonist's ego in the clouds. They manage to find shelter at the local church with the nuns, and in the comfort of his makeshift room, Kirito puts the puzzle together. He deduces that all these people are artificial Flucklights, soul copies of newborns created in a simulator with the time acceleration set to the max. Realizing he needs to reach a larger city to try and send a message to the real world, he falls asleep, concluding that he'll need to drag Eugeo into this mess as his faithful support sidekick. Our amnesiac protagonist wakes up and goes straight to helping Eugeo bang on wood, spending the whole day sweating to try and fell a colossal tree called the Giga Cedar. While Kirito realizes that hitting the same wood every day isn't yielding results, he discovers that Selka is Alice's sister and hears rumors about goblins in the area. Wanting to solve the problem once and for all, he asks if there isn't a better tool, and Eugeo decides to reveal his deepest secret. The blonde boy brings out the blue rose sword, a blade so massive and heavy that he spent 3 months dragging it out of a cave just to keep it in a shed. Kirito decides to test someone else's tool and delivers a powerful blow to the tree, but the sword is too thick and heavy, preventing him from hitting the same notch twice. After analyzing the situation, the protagonist discovers that his object control level is too pathetic to handle that much weight. That night, Kirito decides to take a relaxing bath and ends up having a philosophical chat with Selka through the door, discovering that Eugeo has lost the ability to smile since Alice was taken, and that the entire village dumps crushing expectations on the girl's shoulders. Kirito plays the anime psychologist and tells her to just be herself, and Selka leaves wondering why on earth Alice was arrested in the first place. The next morning, a surprise. Selka has vanished. Rubbing their few brain cells together, the two boys realize she ran off to the northern cave like a suicide seeker and and race to rescue her. Arriving there, they find Selka tied up and surrounded by nasty goblins. Yu-Gi-Oh, proving he has the IQ of a doorknob, screams her name at the top of his lungs, alerting every monster to their presence before freezing in fear like a useless coward. With Yu-Gi-Oh paralyzed like a deer in headlights, Kirito takes charge and concocts a plan worthy of an MMORPG genius. Rush the goblins, put out the fire, and steal weapons from their pile. He sends the useless blonde to distract the lackeys while he enters hand-to-hand combat against the pack leader Ugachi. Kirito steals the swords, tosses one to his friend, and activates a 3-hit skill that grotesquely rips off the leader's arm. But because our protagonist is an arrogant show-off, he celebrates too early and takes a devastating counter hit, falling to the ground screaming in pain. Seeing his friend about to be annihilated, Yu-Gi-Oh finally gains some self-respect, overcomes his fear, and rushes to help, only to be brutally sliced open a second later. As blood gushes from the boy, repressed childhood memories begin to flood Kirito's mind. The power of friendship and trauma fills the protagonist with adrenaline, allowing him to leap up and take the goblin's head off once and for all. With the surviving monsters fleeing, Kirito unties Selka, and the two try to close the hole in Yu-Gi-Oh's chest. Since basic magic isn't cutting it, Selka decides to use a life force transfer, sucking the durability out of herself and Kirito to pump the blonde back to life. Before passing out from the effort, Kirito has a hallucination of Alice saying she's waiting for them at the top of the cathedral. Days later, Yu-Gi-Oh returns to work, but now Kirito has found his rhythm. Having leveled up after the bloodbath, he can finally swing the heavy sword with ease, tearing through the wood with a monstrous blow. Shocked by the size of the notch, Yu-Gi-Oh begs to learn how to play with the sword like that. They spend their days practicing until Yu-Gi-Oh finally fells the entire tree. After a party fueled by village celebrations, Yu-Gi-Oh chooses his new calling as a swordsman, and the two set off on a journey to storm the church and save the blonde waifu. We head back to the real world, where Kirito is just taking a romantic stroll with Asuna until he is brutally attacked by Johnny Black, the last pathetic member of Death Gun. Trying to play the untouchable hero in real life, Kirito attempts to parry a lethal syringe using an umbrella, which obviously goes terribly wrong. He takes an injection of a paralyzing drug and suffers cardiac arrest, dropping dead on the asphalt while Asuna falls into total despair. At the hospital, Asuna joins Kirito's mother and cousin to hear the doctor say the boy survived, but his brain is likely mush. The suspicious suit, Kikuoka, appears out of nowhere. The next day, when the girls try to visit the boy at the military hospital, they are summarily barred at the door. Outraged, Asuna gathers the whole harem in ALO to play FBI, discovering the ambulance never reached its destination and that Kikuoka has mysteriously disappeared. Using Yui's AI to heavily violate privacy laws and track the heart sensors on the protagonist's chest, they discover he was shipped to a pier. Klein drives like a lunatic to get there, only for Yui to warn that a helicopter has already taken the boy's body away, leaving Asuna empty-handed. Refusing to be a useless damsel crying in the corner, Asuna connects the dots and realizes the immersion technology was created by a former colleague of Kayabaz named Rinko. The woman was in California, solemnly ignoring Kikuoka's recruitment emails until she received a direct message from Kirito's possessive girlfriend. Days later, Rinko and her assistant arrive at the Ocean Turtle, the government's ultra-secret base in the middle of the sea. After passing through absurd security protocols, Kikuoka brags about gathering the greatest geniuses for the project until Rinko's assistant rips off her disguise, revealing herself to be none other than Asuna herself in a Mission Impossible cosplay. With a murderous expression on her face, she glares at the suits and demands to know which hole they've stuffed her boyfriend in. Our queen of devotion, Asuna, invades the secret Ocean Turtle base and pins the suit, Kikuoka, against the wall, demanding to know why her boyfriend is in a coma. The bureaucrat confesses that the protagonist's brain melted after the Johnny Black injection, and the only salvation is to shove his soul into a bizarre machine called the Soul Translator to see if the neurons start firing again. The scientist Rinko joins the gossip, wanting to know what the hell this project is, and Kikuoka reveals his comic book villain plan to create an artificial intelligence that knows how to kill adaptively. He tried copying Higa's brain, but the copy went insane when it realized it was a cheap clone. So the brilliant idea was to scan human babies, dump them into a virtual world, and accelerate time until they became 80,000 NPCs. The problem is that these little creatures are too chicken and can't bring themselves to break the rules to commit murder. That's where our useless protagonist comes in, serving as a high-end guinea pig to see if a real human can be more violent than the bots. In the middle of all this, Asuna logs into the fairy game to update her harem of second secondary friends, telling them Kirito has already picked up a new blonde named Alice and a blonde guy named Yujio, but the girl was kidnapped by the church for daring to think for herself. Back in the real world, Asuna and Rinko have a therapy moment. Rinko reveals that the sadistic Kayaba placed a fake bomb on her chest just to throw off the police, and that she ended up falling in love with the genocidal maniac instead of blowing him up. Asuna, proving her Stockholm Syndrome has hit hard, says she holds no grudges because the death game provided the best days of her life. In the end, Rinko goes to sleep and has a wet dream with Kayaba's ghost, waking up more confused than you trying to understand this plot. After 2 long years of living in a camp with his blonde boyfriend, our forgotten protagonist and Yujio finally enter the Sword Mastery Academy to become Imperial Guards and rescue Alice. Kirito spends his free time getting beaten by his mentor Swordalina, who whines about how she'll never surpass the #1 student, an arrogant prick named Volo. She knows Kirito is holding back and begs to see what he's truly capable of, and he promises to unleash all his stored power as a graduation gift. But student life isn't easy. Kirito gets scolded for being late, sits in the cafeteria with Yujio, and the two are mocked by a pair of wealthy nobles who are about as useful as a paperweight. To ignore the idiots, they go to check on the flowers Kirito is growing, and Yujio has a needy breakdown, fearing the protagonist will regain his memory and abandon him in the woods. Kirito strokes his friend's ego, and they head into town to pick up a special order. A blacksmith spent an entire year hammering the massive, hard piece of wood Kirito brought from the countryside, creating a massive black sword. The boy wastes no time. He grabs his thick black instrument, goes to the backyard to test it, and ends up splashing dirt right onto the #1 student's shirt. The elitist Volo uses the stain on his outfit as a flimsy excuse to pick a fight, demanding a real duel. Kirito's mentor panics, but the boy has the brain of a peanut and accepts the challenge without a second thought, preparing to measure swords in front of the whole school. Recess time arrives, and the protagonist is about to cross swords with Volo. His mentor, Swordalina, gives the cliched motivational speech before Volo invokes a two-handed attack boosted by the pure weight of his family pride. Not to be outdone, Kirito unleashes a 4-hit combo to compensate for the size of his weapon. When the heavy blade begins to crush him, the boy uses plot armor and memories of his wife to make his black sword even bigger and harder, absorbing environmental energy and breaking the rich kid's attack. Before they can slice each other for good, Instructor Azuri Ka invades the arena and sends everyone to their rooms. The victory party is fueled by booze, with Yujio and his own mentor drinking until they pass out on the rug. Left alone, Swordalina opens up about her family's inferiority complex, but says seeing Kirito swing his sword like that gave her the confidence she needed to humble Volo in the final tournament. When Kirito goes to get some air, he runs into those 2 noble morons sneaking out of the garden. The jerks simply slaughtered the protagonist's flowers out of pure spite. Kirito collapses on the ground crying over a plant, projecting his emotional dependency onto the fallen petals. But because the universe always coddles him, a mysterious voice echoes from beyond, telling him to use his imagination. The boy magically sucks the life force from the garden to heal his broken flowers. Weeks later, Swordalina smashes Volo in the final exam, takes her graduation bouquet, and leaves, while Kirito and Yujio move up the rankings and get their own little servant girls to carry their bags. The slacker duo Kirito and Yujio finally move up in the world and become elite students, earning their own personal intern slaves, Ronie and Tise. But peace is short-lived because an arrogant prep named Humbert decides to measure the size of his sword against Yujio's. They cross blades in front of everyone, sweat a lot, and in the end, it finishes in a disappointing draw. Later, while eating sandwiches at a picnic like 2 gossiping ants, the protagonists discover that Humbert has been using his own intern, Frenica, as a punching bag for humiliation. Like the wannabe vigilantes they are, Kirito and Yujio go to confront Humbert and his wealthy boyfriend, expecting them to apologize. However, the 2 rich kids spit in the duo's faces, revealing that they are just following the academy rules and that the girl has no choice but to swallow it all in silence. Yujio becomes absolutely furious, but since he's an NPC programmed to be the system's lapdog, he literally can't do a thing. Seeing the soap opera villains get away with it, Tise panics, fearing she'll end up married to human trash like Humbert in the future. Yujio then takes advantage of the crying girl to play the anime hero, patting her head and promising to be her protective shield forever, even though he just proved he is completely useless against the school rules. On a rainy night straight out of a budget period horror flick, Kirito realizes his pages have vanished and bolts out to find them, leaving Yu-Gi-Oh stranded in their room. Suddenly, Frenica bangs on the door with a warning. The two girls have gone to play hero against the abusive nobles. Yu-Gi-Oh rushes to the aristocrat's quarters and finds the worst possible scene. His apprentices tied up and gagged on the bed. Rios and Humbert are gearing up to assault the girls, laughing in Yu-Gi-Oh's face because they know the barcode in his brain prevents him from attacking the upper class. A disgusting red seal appears in Yu-Gi-Oh's eye with a system error 871, the exact same blue screen of death that froze him years ago when he tried to save Alice. But hearing the girls' desperate cries, Yu-Gi-Oh pushes against his programming so hard that his eyeball literally explodes in a shower of blood. Freed from his Wi-Fi chains, he draws the blue rose sword and slices off Humbert's arm like a piece of salami. While Yu-Gi-Oh bleeds out like a stuck pig, Rios tries to finish the job, but the protagonist lunges out of nowhere with his long, thick black sword to block the strike. Kirito enters a cutting frenzy, amputating both of Rios' arms, causing the noble's durability to plummet until he dies of shock. Humbert flees in tears, the girls are freed, and the next day, the supervisor fixes Yu-Gi-Oh's eye with some high school tier healing magic. She congratulates them on breaking the system, but warns that they'll be handed over to the Integrity Knights for their crimes. When the armored policewoman arrives to cuff the criminals, Yu-Gi-Oh nearly has a heart attack. She is none other than his beloved Alice. Yu-Gi-Oh goes into total shock seeing his childhood waifu finally return to him in shining armor. However, Alice completely ignores the existence of this useless blonde, treats Kirito like trash, and throws them both into a filthy dungeon within the Axiom Church. But since keeping anime protagonists locked up is an impossible task, the dynamic duo uses their rare object manipulation powers to reshape the prison and escape their cell with total ease. Now free, they decide the best plan is to climb the giant phallic tower to the top to confront the administrator who brainwashed the Golden Girl. But Alice isn't an idiot like you. She already predicted the prisoners would be a headache. She dispatches another buff Integrity Knight to crush the fugitives on the grand staircase. While the swordsmen work up a sweat in their VR game, the narrative cuts to the real world, where Asuna is touring the government's secret ocean base. She's introduced to a prototype AI robot that looks like an overpriced toaster, only to discover this hunk of metal is directly connected to the medieval world where her boyfriend has been playing hide and seek with magic knights for over a year. Our fugitive duo barely catches a breath outside the prison before running into Eldrie, an Integrity Knight, who pulls a divine weapon seemingly out of thin air, ready to strike down the protagonist. While Kirito dodges the deadly popsicles, Yu-Gi-Oh has an epiphany. This knight in shining armor is actually his childhood friend. Knowing that the administrator wipes memories as easily as you clear your browser history, Yu-Gi-Oh decides to test a theory. He starts screaming about the old days, fishing trips, and the guy's mother, who, by a miracle of lazy writing, is also named Alice. Eldrie has a mental breakdown worthy of a soap opera. He screams in pain as a grotesque purple crystal sprouts from his forehead and shatters, looking like he's squeezing the world's most painful zit. Just as he starts to cry and recognizes his friend, the touching moment is shattered by Deo Selbert, who bursts in firing arrows. Knowing they can't win every battle, they shoot back and try to escape, with no idea where to go. Suddenly, a magic portal opens in the wall, and a mysterious voice tells them to get inside before they become barbecue. They are sucked into a colossal library that would make any shut-in nerd jealous. The mysterious voice introduces herself as Cardinal, the physical manifestation of the game system itself. She cuts to the chase, revealing she knows everything about our useless protagonist coming from the real world. Like a walking encyclopedia, Cardinal gives them the SparkNotes version of history. The world was created by Kayaba, messed up by a lunatic named Quinella, who became the administrator, and shackled by the Taboo Index. Now, the Cardinal system wants to use our heroes as disposable pawns in her grand chess game to topple the dictator once and for all. Miss Cardinal decides it's time for a history lesson and exposes all the administrator's dirty laundry. She reveals the villain's real name is Quinella, a spoiled aristocrat born 350 years ago. Her father thought it'd be a great idea to give his daughter the task of researching sacred arts, and the girl ended up discovering the ultimate cheat code. mode, summoning fire arrows. Realizing that killing living things boosted her stats, Quinella started sneaking out her window every night to farm innocent animals in the woods, leveling up faster than an MMO addict on a double XP weekend. Using her hacks, she convinced the populace she was a divine gift, built the Axiom Church, and turned the world into her own personal feudal pet project. But since even tyrants get old, her skin started to wrinkle. In a desperate bid to preserve her beauty, she dug through the system command list and found the administrator option, seizing total control to get her skin tight again and become immortal. The big problem? Her brain's hard drive got maxed out from too many accumulated memories. She tried to back up her thoughts by transferring them into a little girl, but she was so stupid, she accidentally granted her administrator authority to the kid, creating Cardinal. Quinella tried to delete the girl, but Cardinal fled to the Great Library, where she's been rotting and plotting revenge for the last 200 years. Now, the system lowly hands Kirito and Eugeo some super suspicious metal daggers, telling them they need to stab Quinella to recover Alice's lost memories. Without wasting a second, she teleports the two idiots straight to the cathedral's armory, telling them to grab their swords and climb a full 100 floors to assassinate the dictator while she takes a beauty nap in the penthouse. Back at the cathedral armory, our heroes recover the blue rose sword and the protagonist's nameless black blade. They realize with horror that the church has stockpiled enough weapons and armor to equip an entire army to repel an invasion from the dark territory, but they chose to let it all gather dust out of pure, absolutist greed. Starting the most exhausting stair marathon of their virtual lives, they reach the 25th floor and run into Deus Elbert, the integrity knight who loves playing pyromaniac Robin Hood. The guy proves to be an absurdly annoying enemy, spamming arrows non-stop until the protagonist throws a magical flashbang in his face. In a fit of blind rage, Deus Elbert burns through all his ammo at once, snapping his own bowstring. But the horror show doesn't stop there. He activates his weapon's full control. The bow spontaneously combusts, and he fires a colossal fire arrow. Kirito parries the suicide attack, clearing the way for Eugeo to rush in and try to slice the knight. Deus Elbert still tries to block the blade with the bow, but Eugeo releases his weapon's freezing power, chilling the enemy out and tearing his armor from shoulder to chest in a brutal strike. Defeated and left on the floor like an old rug, Deus Elbert warns them that the welcome party gets much worse on the 50th floor. It's at this exact moment that Eugeo's slow brain finally processes the info. This is the same bastard who kidnapped Alice 8 years ago. Eugeo enters bloodthirsty Avenger mode and raises his sword to decapitate the guy then and there. The protagonist tries to give a stay calm motivational speech but quickly gives up and decides to just fold his arms, letting his friend commit a war crime in peace. At the very last millisecond, Eugeo chickens out, lowers his weapon, and decides to spare the useless knight, claiming the real target is at the top of the tower. They leave the loser behind and go back to climbing the damn stairs, gossiping casually until their chat is cut short when they bump into a pair of creepy little girls blocking the steps. After nearly becoming Night Barbecue, our OP protagonist and his faithful blonde squire reach the 50th floor to catch their breath. But peace lasts exactly 2 seconds because they run into two Lolis named Fiesel and Lenal, who introduce themselves as super innocent nun apprentices. Obviously, if you watch anime, you know that Lolis in dungeons are the purest distillation of danger. Sure enough, the little pests stab the two idiots with poison daggers, leaving our dynamic duo drooling on the floor, paralyzed. The mini psychos drag them like sacks of potatoes to the 50th floor, wanting to brag to the Knight Fanatio and show off that they're real integrity knights now. They give a villainous monologue about using their cuteness to lower the sucker's guards, but Kirito, master of plot armor, magically stands up. The kid reveals he'd already activated an anti-poison spell before even saying good morning, and returns the favor by paralyzing the two brats on the floor with their own weapons. Now it's Fanatio's turn to shine, or rather, shoot solar lasers into the protagonist's face. Things get insane, and just as she's about to obliterate the black swordsman, he summons a damn mirror and reflects the laser straight into the knight's forehead. Her helmet cracks down the middle, revealing that the heavy armor was hiding, guess what? A beautiful waifu who is now furious that her little secret is out. She becomes possessed by rage and starts firing sunbeams everywhere like a lethal disco ball. Eugeo, who finally manages to move a muscle, freezes the crazy lady solid, but Fanatio is stubborn and charges one last death laser. Kirito activates his dark sword, unleashes a massive black beam, and the two powers collide until Fanatio is sent flying, hitting the floor hard. With the waifu on the brink of death, Kirito gets a pang of guilt and begs Cardinal to save her life. He uses the dagger, opens a magical rescue portal, heals Yu-Gi-Oh with an antidote, and the two move on, leaving the paralyzed Lolis on the floor to reflect on their life choices. Taking the most broken elevator on the server to skip the cardio, Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh reach the 80th floor, a garden in the clouds. There they find Alice herself, sitting under an olive tree catching a tan. Yu-Gi-Oh thinks his crush is sleeping, but she was just photosynthesizing along with the tree. She stands up, shocked that these two nobodies managed to crush her fellow Integrity Knights, and demands to know why the hell they're making such a mess of the church. When the boys try to give her the leader Quinella is a crazy villain talk, Alice wants nothing to do with it. She transforms the entire tree into an absurd sword and chooses violence.
Damn it! Her sword!
Yu-Gi-Oh's genius plan is to sneakily stab the blonde with Cardinal's magic dagger, but Alice isn't stupid. She disperses her sword into a swarm of cutting golden petals that sweeps them both away, calling our heroes noobs with pathetic attacks. Realizing brute force has failed miserably, Kirito decides to play human bait so Yu-Gi-Oh can chant a spell. The black swordsman goes one-on-one against Alice, but the blonde parries every blow like she's swatting a mosquito. When Kirito is pinned against the wall, he resorts to the most primitive tactic of all. He jumps on her, grapples the knight, and yells for Yu-Gi-Oh to freeze everything. The blonde activates the ice sword, freezing his own best friend along with the crush, and runs in for the final stab, except Alice breaks the ice with her petals like it was thin glass, leaving Yu-Gi-Oh looking like an idiot. Meanwhile, Kirito charges a dark laser and fires it in her face, generating a clash of energy so absurdly strong that the tower wall explodes. The pressure sucks Kirito and Alice through the giant hole and into the sidereal abyss. To make Yu-Gi-Oh's life worse, the wall has a healing factor and reconstructs itself instantly, leaving the blonde isolated inside, looking like he just missed his bus. Hanging off the outside of the tower by the tip of his sword, Kirito finds himself dangling over the abyss while clutching Alice's waist with his other hand. The blonde knight pulls some proud heroine drama, demanding he let go so she can die with honor. But Kirito convinces the crazy girl that becoming a pancake on the pavement doesn't help anyone. Alice stabs her own sword into the wall and summons a chain to bind them together at the waist, proving this relationship is already getting intimate. Kirito creates a metal peg to climb and asks her to go first, but Alice gives the flimsy excuse that she has a fear of heights. In reality, the little princess just didn't want the protagonist looking up her skirt during the climb, so Kirito the simp accepts the dead weight, building metal stairs and dragging the knight up brick by brick. When the kid runs out of mana, she finally decides to help create the steps until they reach the 85th floor, where a bunch of ugly gargoyles from the Dark Territory decide to crash the party. With zero room to fight, Kirito tosses Alice over the ledge like a sack of cement, but he slips on the peg and nearly drags her into the hole with him. Seething with rage, Alice pulls the chain with such brute force that Kirito is slammed face first against the wall before landing on the platform. After mincing the stone monsters, they sit down to rest and eat the warm buns Cardinal gave them. Kirito almost incinerates the food, but Alice takes control and heats the rolls to perfection so they can scarf them down together. Seeing that the church tower was infested with dark monsters, the blonde finally starts to realize her leader is a fraud, and Kirito vomits out the whole truth about Quinella. While the little couple has a picnic on the balcony, poor Yu-Gi-Oh reaches the 90th floor and runs into Bercoli, the supreme commander of the Knights, taking a nice naked steam bath. The buff old-timer is impressed, steps out of the tub covering his holy sword, and warns that since they spared Fanatio's life, he'll go easy on him. But without his edgy boyfriend to carry the game, Yu-Gi-Oh draws his ice sword and prepares to face the bath boss. While the useless blonde finally decides to do something productive, Yu-Gi-Oh faces Bercoli and releases the full power of his blue rose sword, swallowing them both in a massive wave of ice.
I never saw a swordsman toss his blade during a fight before.
Since he can't win in a brawl, Yu-Gi-Oh activates the weapon's secondary effect that drains the life force of everything frozen, betting all his chips that his teenage virgin HP bar is larger than the muscular old man's. He tries to use Talk no Jutsu to break the Knight Leader free from the administrator's control, but gets a reality check when Bercoli plays an Uno reverse card, revealing he was the one who killed the legendary dragon in the cave. Before the blonde kid can process this humiliation, the creepy senator Chudelkin spawns out of thin air, uses his authority to turn Berkoli into a stone statue, and drags the frozen Yu-Gi-Oh straight to the administrator's fury, proving the boy is only good for getting kidnapped. Meanwhile, the protagonist and his new blonde waifu are still hanging off the wall that separates the human realm from the dark territory and decide to take a breather. Taking advantage of the romantic, extreme climbing vibes, the protagonist drops a truth bomb on her. He tells her she was his childhood friend, that she broke the taboo index just by existing near an imaginary line, and that her mind was completely rewritten because the administrator loves brainwashing people. He begs her to trust him and turn against the final boss. Alice is more confused than a viewer trying to understand this anime's lore, but curiosity wins out, and she keeps listening to the Black Swordsman's story. Still camping outside the 85th floor, the protagonist continues to fill Alice's head with Quinella's evil plan and the reason why the creatures of darkness are invading the place. The knight confesses that even Berkoli had a gut feeling about this thankless job and reveals she even remembered having a younger sister. The protagonist promises to take her back to her hometown before her mind goes down the drain, so Alice decides to flip the script and betray the church to protect the Empire. But at the exact millisecond she thinks this, an agonizing pain hits her right eye, projecting a cybernetic system error that the protagonist immediately recognizes as the same seal that blew up Yu-Gi-Oh's face back at the academy. Knowing the girl is about to become a Cyclops, he begs her to cool her head. When Alice asks if it was Quinella who planted it, he theorizes that the nerdy creator gods of this world placed the seal to stop rebellions. Refusing to be a puppet, the blonde tells the system to go to hell, asks the protagonist to hold her body tight, and lets her own eye explode in a rain of censored blood, breaking the seal for good. Up on the 100th floor, Yu-Gi-Oh wakes up in the big boss's bedroom and tries to play stealth assassin to stick a dagger in her. A mysterious voice even warns the boy to run for his life, but the administrator wakes up and senses the blonde kid's presence. Knowing exactly how to manipulate a starved teenager, Quinella strips off all her clothes and flaunts her completely naked body, promising him all the love he never had. Yu-Gi-Oh swallows the bait faster than a hungry fish, falling perfectly into the woman's spell. As she begins to erase his mind, the boy simps out and recites the command to remove core protection, surrendering his soul to the synthesis ritual. The new one-eyed waifu wakes up to the jolts of being carried by the protagonist, realizing they've already reached the 95th floor of the tower. The Black Swordsman mentions he used a sacred art to track his friend's sword, finding it discarded in an ice-filled room on the 90th floor. But Yu-Gi-Oh has vanished, and Alice panics when she sees that Berkoli has literally become a gray, lifeless paperweight. Defying medicine and common sense, the statue cracks an eye open just to give a proud smile, because the girl popped her own eye out, telling them both to head to the roof to end the administrator's reign of terror before passing out for good. Reaching the 99th floor, they break into the Senate chamber and find a scene straight out of The Matrix. Dozens of disgusting capsules hang human bodies connected to tubes, looking like expressionless vegetables. Alice realizes these empty husks are former knights the boss turned into a giant mental control router to manipulate the Senate. Completely disgusted, they try to leave to hunt down the villain, but are blocked by the spherical freak named Chudelkin. The clown in the red robe and gold mask starts blabbering in his high-pitched, annoying voice, promising a very familiar surprise. Alice and Kirito rush to the next floor, where they see a knight emerging from a hole in the ceiling. It's Yu-Gi-Oh, now colder than ever, clad in a new suit of armor. Without showing a trace of emotion, the simp declares that he came down here for one reason only, to kill them both. Kirito and the freshly brainwashed Yu-Gi-Oh start clashing swords while Alice watches with the look of someone judging their life choices. The protagonist tries to use the good old power of friendship speech to invade the blonde kid's mind, and incredibly, it works. Mostly because Quinella's brainwashing was sloppier than a last-minute college thesis. Their bond was too strong to be erased, so Yu-Gi-Oh regains his free will, and as a thank you, uses the Blue Rose sword to freeze Kirito and Alice into a giant popsicle. With his friends in the freezer, he heads up the tower determined to cancel the administrator's life insurance. Pretending to be a loyal doormat, he lets the woman remove the piety module from his forehead, waiting for the perfect moment to shove his sword into her. Unfortunately, the tyrant has an anti-metal barrier that blocks the penetration, leaving Yu-Gi-Oh empty-handed. She tries to brainwash the boy again, but he resists, proving he's no longer the church's simp, and preparing for a real confrontation. Meanwhile, Kirito and Alice finally break the ice and run after their friend. On the way, they run into the bizarre clown Chudelkin, who decides the best way to stop the invaders is by summoning a giant fire genie with his own ugly face. Now, the protagonist and the knight have to sweat it out to break through this egocentric hell and reach the administrator's room before the blonde kid does something irreparably stupid against the final boss. Trapped in the sauna with Chudelkin's giant fire genie, our trio realizes that getting pummeled by an incandescent mirage isn't exactly a winning strategy. Alice decides the only way to put out this fire is by taking down the clown himself, warning the boys she can hold the monster off for exactly 10 seconds. While the blonde knight swings her sword to distract the fire beast, Yu-Gi-Oh fires a spell directly at Quinella's face to draw the tyrant's focus. With the stage set, Kirito unleashes the special ability of his nameless black sword and ruthlessly impales Chudelkin, sending the court jester to the afterlife and disintegrating the genie in the process. With the trash taken out, they face the final boss, who decides to throw a wet blanket on the mood by revealing that Kirito is a human from the real world. Our protagonist tries to talk tough, claiming the gods outside could delete the entire server with the push of a button, but the administrator couldn't care less about moderation. She just wants to rule her digital sandbox in peace. She reveals that the Integrity Knights were merely puppets to buy time, and immediately spits out an experimental module that summons a bizarre monster made entirely of swords. Alice tries to play the hero, but takes a brutal spike right to the chest. Kirito follows close behind, only to be sliced up and tossed against the wall like garbage. Just as the sword golem is about to deliver the coup de grace, Charlotte, Cardinal's pet spider, jumps in to save the day. The insect is brutally crushed, but with her dying breath, she begs Yu-Gi-Oh to use the summoning dagger. A magical door swings open. Cardinal emerges, blasting the monster with lightning, heals the wounded, and weeps over her spider's corpse, setting the stage for the ultimate 4-on-1 showdown. With a 4-on-1 advantage, the group thinks they're finally going to wipe the floor with the administrator, but Quinella had already anticipated the heroic surge. She locks down the entire 100th floor to ensure no one escapes the massacre and mocks Cardinal. When the little sage retorts that the tyrant no longer has an army, Quinella gives a sadistic laugh, and the sword golem rises from the ground. She reveals the disgusting monster is forged from 300 sacrificed people, and that she plans to grind up half the population of the underworld to create a fleet of blades to invade the real world. Realizing the crystals in the ceiling are the human memories keeping the golem alive, Cardinal understands she can't destroy the creature without erasing the victims. Completely out of options, she kneels and offers her own life in exchange for the safety of the 3 teenagers. Quinella accepts the deal and begins to fry the loli with dark lightning, repeatedly torturing the poor soul, while Kirito and the others stand there watching like chumps. After blowing off Cardinal's leg, the villainess finally ends the horror show. As the sage bleeds out, Yu-Gi-Oh hears the voice of the original Alice coming from the ceiling and makes a drastic decision. He begs Cardinal to use her final spell to literally turn him into a sword.
Please, Cardinal, with whatever strength you have left, I want you to turn me into a sword.
The blonde boy fuses with his blade and the memory crystal, becoming a massive flying weapon. Yu-Gi-Oh tears through the air, shatters the sword golem, and goes straight for Quinella. In a massive clash of power, he destroys the tyrant's weapon and severs her right arm, but the impact shatters the boy's blade, and his body falls to the floor, snapped in half. Quinella, completely unhinged, transforms her own severed arm into a new sword and walks over to finish off a traumatized Kirito. When Alice jumps in front to take the fatal blow, the protagonist has a violent flashback of his exact same failure in the past. Refusing to watch a replay of his trauma, Kirito finally steps up, blocks the villain's blade, and prepares to end this sadistic game once and for all. The final battle reaches its climax, and our formerly useless protagonist now has to square off against the High Administrator, who knows every system hack in the book. To humiliate him further, she starts spamming the same sword skills from the game that traumatized our hero for 2 years. In a moment of weakness, the protagonist loses his right arm, proving he can't take the heat. But he's not alone. Yu-Gi-Oh, now reduced to half a man, decides to be useful one last time. Using his own blood like a giant ketchup packet, he restores the blue rose sword. The protagonist grabs the ice blade and goes beast mode with dual wielding, slicing off the villain's remaining arm. Realizing she's about to kick the bucket, the administrator tries to escape through the system console like a coward quitting a match. But Chudelkin, the bizarre clown who is still on fire, wakes up in ultimate simp mode and grabs his boss, begging for attention. The two of them turn into a human barbecue in an explosion of pure cringe. Meanwhile, Yujio's life finally slips away as he says his goodbyes. Remembering Alice as a child, the protagonist rushes to the console and calls the real world, only to discover the lab is under a heavy terrorist attack. Kikuoka shouts for him to take Alice and run to the world's end altar before the internet goes down for good. But a massive power surge fries the base's servers, causing the protagonist's brain to blue screen and sending his consciousness straight into limbo. Thanks to the short circuit in the real world, our protagonist now has the cognitive ability of a cabbage and spends his days drooling in a wheelchair. With a softened heart, Alice puts this vegetable on the back of her pet dragon and flies back to her hometown. There, she builds an isolated hut in the woods, as the villagers treat her worse than radioactive waste and forbid her from entering the village. The only one who visits this makeshift asylum is her sister Selka, while Alice earns some spare change chopping wood for an arrogant landowner who is about as useful as a paperweight. While our ex-knight plays house with her plant boyfriend, the Integrity Knights discover that the late administrator planned to turn half of humanity into mindless sword golems. Suddenly, a dandy named Eldrie shows up at the hut, begging Alice to return to the army. His brilliant suggestion: simply decapitate the vegetable protagonist so she won't have any more distractions and can focus on the war. Alice obviously tells the guy to kick rocks, forcing him to leave with his tail between his legs. Later that night, the protagonist suddenly reacts, proving that even a legume can sense danger. Alice looks outside and realizes her useless old village is on fire, lighting up the night sky and signaling that the peace is over. The village is being invaded by creatures from the Dark Territory, and our vegetable protagonist tries to crawl across the floor to reach his sword in a scene so pathetic you'd actually feel sorry for him. Alice tells the veggie to stay put, hops on her flying lizard, and heads off to save the idiots who kicked her out of her home. In the center of the village, the mayor and the greedy mogul Barbosa refuse to evacuate because they'd rather protect sacks of gold than save their own lives. Alice warns them they're about to become orc snacks, but the rich man accuses her of being a filthy witch. Losing her patience with people who have the IQ of a door, Alice rips off her cloak, reveals her shining golden armor, and announces she is an Integrity Knight, leaving the old men stunned. With no time for small talk, she has her dragon breathe fire on the front lines, stops a goblin sword with her bare hand, and turns the entire horde into mush using her weapon's broken AoE attack. The surviving monsters wet themselves and run crying back to the border. Back in the real world, foreign terrorists invade the subaquatic base and cut the power. Kikuoka and the IT nerds manage to kick on the emergency generator, while Asuna nearly chokes the suit out of his tie, demanding her boyfriend wake up. The team's hacker explains the protagonist's brain blue-screened on purpose because he couldn't handle the guilt of losing his friend, turning him into a human potato on the server. Knowing the terrorists want to steal Alice's code and are messing with the main panel, the only hope is to rescue the light cube before they do. Asuna shoots a hungry look at an empty immersion machine in the corner, ready to jump into the game and settle this mess herself. Evil corporate CEO Gabriel Miller and his team of sweaty mercenaries storm the Ocean Turtle's secret base, desperate to steal Alice and the Soul Translator technology. But like any cheap IT project, they hit an encryption wall harder than the protagonist's plot armor, preventing any access to the control room or the light cubes without tripping the invasion alarm. Frustrated by his inability to get his hands on the files, with no options in the real world, he decides to use his own STL to dive deep into the underworld and take Alice by force. He logs into the premium account of Vecta, the Dark Emperor, and drags his henchman Vasago along to play Dark Knight in the middle of the chaos. Their brilliant plan is to abuse the final load test, an apocalyptic event that will erase the border between the human empire and the Dark Territory, plunging everyone into a bloody war. While the villains set up the biggest digital mess in history, Asuna finally gets the full scoop and decides to dive into the underworld to protect her comatose boyfriend and his blonde AI friend. But she doesn't log in as any ordinary player. She hacks the system and logs in directly as Stacia, the goddess of creation, capable of manipulating the very ground beneath their feet. Far away in Tokyo, Sinon wakes up sweaty and breathless from a nightmare where she relived her humiliation at the hands of Subtilizer. She remembers exactly the sensation of him grabbing her neck and whispering in her ear that her soul would be sweet, proving that VR trauma hits just as hard as a sledgehammer to the skull. As he descends into the dark realm, Gabriel Miller reflects on his childhood obsession with the essence of life, proving he's always been a certified psychopath. Assuming the supreme account of Emperor Vecta Vecta, he sits on the throne and demands total submission from the forces of the Dark Territory. But General Shasta isn't exactly keen on kissing the new boss's feet and shares an assassination plot with his lover, Lipia. Later, Vecta goes to his chambers and finds Lipia dressed as a courtesan, ready to offer much more than a relaxing massage. She tries to pierce the Emperor's body with a hidden blade, but Vecta grabs her neck and strangles the poor girl to death, just to admire her glowing soul leaking from her body. This triggers his twisted nostalgia, and we see a wonderful flashback of young Gabriel's obsession with souls. Believing that his friend Alicia's soul was hidden deep inside her brain, he simply shoved a giant needle into her ear. When she died, he saw that delicious glow rising to the heavens, confirming that therapy was never an option for this guy. Back in the game, Vecta gathers his legion of monsters and displays Lipia's frozen head as a bizarre centerpiece, leaving a clear warning not to mess with him. Completely unhinged after seeing his girlfriend turned into a popsicle, Shasta tries to kill the Emperor by unleashing an incarnation storm so strong it nearly wipes his own generals off the map. But when he charges at Vecta, he ends up being swallowed by a black hole in the villain's empty soul, vanishing from existence without leaving a trace of dust.
Soul, but it is dead. I'm so sorry, Lipia.
While the band plays in hell, Alice and our vegetable protagonist arrive at the camp near the Eastern Gate, where the blonde discover the barrier will collapse in just a few days, leaving the human empire wide open and begging for help. Alice drags Kirito's useless, drooling body to the military camp at the Eastern Gate, where the Integrity Knights welcome the duo with open arms. The blonde knight can't hide her concern over the protagonist's vegetative state following the absurd brawl against the administrator, praying to the heavens that he wakes up soon and stops being mere dead weight in a wheelchair so he can help crush the Dark Territory. While Kirito takes the longest vacation of his life, Alice and the knights gather to brainstorm the best possible defense strategy, knowing the massive gate is under daily attack from enemy forces. This group's only hope is to hold the line and pray that reinforcements from the central cathedral don't stop for a coffee break along the way. In this climate of absolute despair, students Ronie and Tisei pop up at the camp carrying a message from Cardinal, but their expressions crumble the moment they discover that Eugeo has kicked the bucket and Kirito has become a glorified vegetable, proving they still have giant hearts. The girls volunteer to clean and care for the protagonist's body, crying rivers as they pray for a miracle and for the victory of the human empire. With the giant gate on the verge of collapsing and opening the floodgates for the monsters, everyone swallows their tears, readies their weapons, and takes their positions for the bloody battle that will decide who lives and who becomes digital fertilizer. The war finally breaks out, and the human empire's army is breaking a sweat trying to hold back the horde of CGI extras from the Dark Territory. On the front lines, Dio Selbert, Fanatio, and Eldrie are dishing out hits like their lives depend on it, mostly because they obviously do. Right behind them, Old Man Bercoli is just chilling with his time-splitting sword, patiently waiting for his ultimate ability's cooldown to reset while he watches the carnage unfold. Providing support, we have Sheita and Renly, though Renly is that type of useless player who joins the raid just to farm loot and enters a state of chronic panic the second a boss looks at him. The slaughter is in full swing on both sides, and even one of the 4 whirling blades becomes pixel compost in the middle of the chaos. While everyone else is losing their heads and liters of digital blood, our golden knight Alice decides to play the scavenger. She hides in the shadows and starts sucking up all the sacred power leaking from the fresh corpses to charge the biggest laser bomb this server has ever seen. It's the absolute peak of eco-friendly corpse recycling, but because bad news never comes alone, Renly's bird brain short circuits. The kid loses the last shred of non-existent courage he had, pulls a 180, and bails, running away crying from the danger. With this pathetic retreat, on par with his last attempt at a relationship, he leaves a massive hole in the rear defense, proving that trusting your 6 to a frightened teenager is always the worst possible strategy. The carnage continues at full throttle while Alice keeps playing macabre Legos, gathering the spatial elements from the stiffs to build her laser cannon. Meanwhile, the coward Renly is hiding in the supply pantry, shaking like a leaf, until he's busted by the trainees Ronie and Tisei. The situation worsens when the mountain goblins break through the front line and invade the tent to steal the camp's lunch. Luckily for the girls, the psycho Lolis Lenal and Fiesel pop out of nowhere and slice the intruding goblins with the same ease you devour a guilt-ridden midnight snack. Seeing 2 kids doing his job, Renly finally decides to grow a pair. He swallows swallows his tears, draws his twin-edged wings, and activates his perfect weapon control, showing that maybe he isn't a total dead weight in this raid. Outside, the Dark Mage's goth leader, DIL, thinks she's a tactical genius and orders her lackeys to launch an aerial attack. But Old Man Bercoli finally stops posing and obliterates the entire flock with a single strike of his broken sword, canceling all their life subscriptions instantly. The Dark Mages try to retaliate by conjuring a sacred art from the rear, but their magic fails miserably due to a connection error. It's the perfect signal for Alice, who hits the imaginary button and detonates her bomb, frying a colossal chunk of the enemy army and flipping the script for the human empire with a single lethal light show. After nearly turning herself into BBQ in her own explosion, Alice brushes off the dust and admires the sea of toasted corpses. But a stubborn brute named Furger, the ogre chief, decides he's not dying today. He survives the bombardment, roars like a rabid animal, and charges to crush the blonde knight with a giant club. Alice charges without hesitation and takes the creature down with a single blow, sending the ogre back to the lobby without breaking a sweat or feeling a shred of pity. Far from there, the Dark Lord and Master Creep Vecta catches the scent of Alice's absurd power and decides she's the access key to his real world. He orders his horde of knights, goblins, and giants to march like madmen to kidnap the girl. But the human army sets up a massive bait to throw the villains off. They gather Renly, Bercoli, Alice, Sheeta, the support girls, 4 dragons, a bunch of extras, and of course, Kirito in vegetative potato mode. The plan is to lure the enemies away from the main gate and buy time until the useless protagonist finally wakes up from his lazy coma to save the day. However, the Dark Mages are tired of being humiliated. They decide to use the orcs as human batteries, sacrificing the poor guys to generate spatial power and vomit a plague of poisonous insects onto the Army of Light. With no way to tank the dirty magic, young Eldrier embraces the heroic sacrifice cliché. He throws himself in front like human bug spray, absorbing all the venom and saving the gang before kicking the bucket. Seeing his comrade turned into insect Swiss cheese leaves Alice absolutely livid. The Golden Knight goes full berserker mode, charging like a runaway tank and slicing through the entire mage unit alone, avenging Eldrier and showing that her rage bar has no limits. While the decoy unit advances through enemy lands begging for mercy, the Dark Emperor decides it's time to send the pugilists and the evil cavalry to steamroll everyone. In the middle of this chaos, we meet Sheeta, also known as the Silent, who suffers from a wonderful curse. She can slice through anything she touches, no matter how hard it is. And to prove the universe has a sense of humor, the pugilist leader, Iskan, arrives beating his chest with the confidence of someone with absolutely impenetrable skin. When the pugilists reach the decoy unit, Sheeta volunteers to stall the guys and engages in a mortal duel against Iskan. The battle becomes a true test of endurance, but her thin blade finally manages to penetrate his hard skin, leaving the guy bleeding and confused. After a long standoff rubbing their weapons together in close quarters, the two end up developing a bizarre mutual admiration, and she retreats to rejoin her team. At the end of the first day's march, the team sets up camp to rest, completely oblivious to the fact that Vasago was following them like a professional stalker, secretly shanking the extras. When this maniac chooses Ronier and Tisei as his next victims, the sky splits open and Stacia, the goddess of creation, drops down from above, glowing brighter than high-beam headlights. She blocks the attack and casts Vasago into the abyss, but before plummeting to what should be his certain death, the bastard recognizes Asna's face in the middle of that absurd light show.
It's her. The Killer Queen of the Knights of the Blood Oath. Lightning Flash.
After playing God and tearing the earth to create 3 colossal fissures that swallowed Vasago and his henchmen, Asna lands elegantly and introduces herself to the jaw-dropped army of extras. But the divine credit card bill arrives fast, and she feels her brain frying with pain, realizing that playing around with the game map causes a heavy overload on her Fluctlight. She understands she could suffer irreversible damage if she keeps acting like the server owner. Ignoring the headache, she runs straight to our vegetable protagonist's tent. When the sack of potatoes hears Asna's voice, he gets a reality check. Even with his brain in airplane mode, he tries to stretch out a trembling little hand toward her while crying like a newborn calf. Asna jumps on him with that warm hug she's been holding back for months. But because a protagonist's joy never lasts long, Alice attacks the girl and kills the romantic vibe instantly, clearly annoyed by the competition invading her private nurse territory. With tension in the air, they decide to fake maturity and gather the group to discuss the enemy's true objective. Later that night, the war atmosphere turns into a literal slumber party, with Ronnie, Alice, Asna, and Sordalina sitting in a circle trading gossip and telling stories about Kirito's glory days, while the man himself stays there, drooling and just existing in the back of the room. A flashback reveals the late Pontifex confessing to Bercoli that she felt an absurd fear of dying every day, simply because she didn't own the entire universe. In the present, Bercoli finally understands his dead boss's paranoia while preparing for the slaughter. Meanwhile, Ronnie is shoving food down our catatonic protagonist's throat, who has mysteriously regained his appetite, but the feast is interrupted by war horns blowing everyone's eardrums out. Heading out, the Integrity Knights see the Dark Army crossing the abyss, hanging from pathetic little ropes. Bercoli gives a sadistic grin and simply tells his knights to cut the ropes, sending thousands of goblins and pugilists screaming into the void. Iskan watches his men turn into pancakes and cries with rage, remembering that Emperor Vecta, who is actually the American mercenary Gabriel, threatened to execute everyone if they didn't make this suicide crossing. In the real world, Gabriel realizes the enemy AIs are giving him trouble and tells his lackey critter to activate cheat mode. The guy syncs the game time with the real world and launches a fake beta test for thousands of bloodthirsty Americans to log directly into dark territory accounts. Realizing the foreign invasion, the AI Yui hacks the taxi system and sends a car to fetch Sinon and Lifa to the secret base, where they find the bodies of Kirito and Asna in a coma. Inside ALO, Yui gathers the luxury extras, Klein, Aegil, Lisbeth, and Silica, to explain that Alice is the pinnacle of virtual existence. The genius solution is to convert their high-level accounts to the underworld. Lisbeth summons all the players on the server and gives a dramatic motivational speech, asking them to sacrifice their beloved avatars in a war with no interface where you can't log out. The crowd complains, but her blacksmith's charisma works, and they all accept virtual suicide. The madness hits its peak when thousands of American players fall from the sky like red knights, ready to spread freedom and chaos. The underworld turns into a crowded pirate server as 20,000 American players invade the map with zero mercy, forcing Asna, Alice, Bercoli, and the rest of the team to sweat buckets just to hold back the horde of trolls. While chaos reigns, Gabriel, in his Dark Lord Vecta cosplay, spots Alice and decides the blonde is going to be his trophy of the day. The guy straight up steals a Dark Knight's dragon like he's playing a vehicle theft simulator and flies off, drooling in the girl's direction. Meanwhile, Iskan, the leader of the buffed pugilists, snaps upon seeing his people being massacred just because the game's restrictive system forbids any defense. Fed up with the terms of service, the madman shoves his finger into his own face, rips out his right eye, and breaks the cursed seal. With literal blood in his eye, he pulls a mortal jump over the canyon with his lackey's help, proving you don't need depth perception to dish out a beatdown. He strikes a political deal with Asna, promising an alliance in exchange for a new bridge for his people, which she accepts instantly like a politician during election season. Alice, meanwhile, tries to pull a lone hero act and flies ahead to end the war, but the move backfires when Emperor Vecta ambushes her, snatches her up with his winged lizard, and flees toward the World's End altar. Bercoli, the ultimate uncle, hops on his own dragon and goes after them to rescue the girl. In the rear, the decoy force takes one on the chin when the hacker critter vomits 20,000 more Americans into the arena to surround everyone. To make matters worse, the psychopath Vasago decides to log in with a special account just to torment the gang. When all seems lost and defeat looks certain, the sky splits open and a blinding light tears through the clouds. It's Sinon, logged into the Sun Goddess super account, obliterating the Americans in the blink of an eye like spatial bug spray. Landing with the subtlety of a divine meteor, Sinon drops from the sky, hugging Asna and grabbing the useless protagonist's vegetative body to catch up and check the merchandise merchandise. She tells Asuna to focus on cleaning up the Americans while she takes the heat of dealing with Vecta. In another corner of the map, Leafa finally shows up logging in as the Earth Goddess and runs straight into Lil Peelin, the Orc leader. In a masterstroke worthy of a very questionable adult movie script, Leafa befriends the big monster and willingly accepts being tied up to be taken straight to the big boss. Their fun ends when Dil, the knockoff goth mage, appears out of nowhere to ruin the roleplay. She beats up Lil Peelin and tries to suck all the life force out of Leafa's avatar, wanting to drain the girl dry. But the orc finds strength in hatred, ignores the server rules, and charges forward to protect his pet goddess. Taking advantage of the distraction, Leafa breaks free from the ropes and crushes the sadistic mage without a shred of mercy. Down south, Berkoli continues his relentless pursuit on Dragonback and activates his cowardly secret skill to take down Vecta's flying mount. The elderly knight engages in a brutal duel against the Dark Emperor, but soon realizes that grit doesn't beat hacks. Taking a beating from Vecta's stun abilities, Berkoli accepts that retirement has finally arrived and decides to sacrifice his own life to ensure Alice's safety. Meanwhile, in the ruins, the American players fall for a pathetic trap, and Asuna dives into the bloodbath, completely unaware that the sadistic Vasigo is lurking nearby in a brand new avatar. Just as everyone's stamina bars are about to hit zero and despair kicks in, a flash crosses the sky. It's Klein, everyone's favorite potion chugger, falling from the sky with his ALO account and paving the way for an avalanche of extras willing to die for the protagonist. The underworld turns into a total hellscape, and Asuna is one hair's breadth away from getting permanently deleted. But just as defeat seems guaranteed, the sky vomits light and the ALO cavalry lands in full force. Klein, Egil, Lisbeth, Silica, and thousands of players arrive glowing, converting their high-level accounts and ready to lay the smackdown on everyone. Asuna almost cries seeing her personal fan club, receiving hugs and pampered attention while the troop takes the front lines. The ALO leaders advance like a runaway tank over the Red Horde, which is nothing more than a bunch of Americans being played for fools. Lisbeth and Silica explain that the AI Yui spammed the hell out of their contacts, warning them about the protagonist's vegetative state, begging for help. With her HP back up, Asuna becomes the General of Carnage, setting the support team to heal the wounded while she runs to bury her sword deep into enemy flesh. In the real world, Higa has a stroke of genius. He deduces that the protagonist's broken brain can be fixed by sucking up the data and memories that Asuna, Leafa, and Sinon have of the boy. The problem is that the machine to perform this magic is in a room controlled by terrorists. Wearing his best low-budget spy skin, Higa plans to crawl through the grimy air ducts and toss a makeshift robot into the main shaft to distract the villains, while the creepy tech guy Yanai volunteers as a bodyguard. Back in the game, the duel between Berkoli and Vecta reaches the peak of humiliation. Bleeding rivers, the old man activates his past-piercing hack and delivers a fatal blow to the Emperor, erasing his own life in the process. In his final breaths, he hallucinates about the ghost of the late and naked administrator, until Alice arrives just in time to hug the stiff uncle and break down in tears. At the military base, Gabriel wakes up fully, flashes a sickly grin, and prepares to log in with his broken Subtilizer account, proving that digital trash doesn't die, it just respawns. Sinon swoops into a candy-pink landscape looking like a heavily armed sugar plum fairy, landing right next to Alice, who is crying a river over Berkoli's corpse. Alice thinks she saved the day by killing the big bad, but Sinon drops a truth bomb. Vecta is just some foreign nerd in the real world, and his death here means absolutely nothing, making the old man's sacrifice as useless as an OnlyFans subscription. Alice has a total existential breakdown over the world being a lie, but Sinon plays the Kirito card, reminding her that the vegetable is actually suffering and his soul's pain is 100% real. Alice sucks it up, turns Berkoli's body into golden stardust with a spell, and hauls tails south on her dragon. Meanwhile, Sinon stays behind to stall for time and keep the villain busy. Elsewhere, Iskan is taking a brutal beating from the Red Knights. He's about to launch a suicide attack and join the choir invisible when Sheta shows up, slicing through everyone. She finally realizes her manic compulsion to cut things was actually just a suppressed urge to protect this shirtless hunk. The two embrace in the middle of a bloodbath, already planning their beautiful, dysfunctional family. Further away, Asuna and Klein are getting absolutely swamped. To make matters worse, that psycho hobo Pooh appears on top of a statue. He goes full TED Talk mode, convincing thousands of Chinese and Korean players in some grungy net cafe to log in by spinning a massive fanfic about the Japanese stealing the server. This horde of useful idiots rains from the sky like a plague of locusts and begins steamrolling the human army. To top off the despair, the sky vomits a bizarre vortex and Gabriel emerges from it, ready to attack Sinon. In the real world, while Higa is sweating bullets in a ventilation shaft trying to hack the system and wake up our comatose protagonist, that useless snake Yanai pulls a gun on him, proving you can never trust an ugly side character. That rat Yanai finally drops the act, revealing he's the ultimate simp for the administrator. Since the protagonist ruined his dead waifu's plans, he's seeking revenge by helping the Americans. At the same time, Kikuoka and Rinko discover this traitor planted the restriction code in the system from the start, proving their company's hiring process is a complete joke. Inside the game, Subtilizer is literally mopping the floor with Sinon's face, but she draws strength from her special friendship with Kirito and escapes total humiliation, while Sheita and Iskan are waiting for the game over screen in each other's arms. The well-endowed Lifa and the pigman Lil Peeland arrive leading an army of furious orcs to save the day at the very last millisecond. The Fairy Squad tries to use the power of friendship to convince the infinite horde of Chinese and Korean players that they've been scammed, but Vasago cuts everyone's mics and incites total chaos. With no other choice, Asuna and her crew decide to drop their weapons and take the beating just to protect the virtual NPCs of this world. Vasago seizes the moment of pure despair to deliver his classic villain monologue, revealing to Asuna that he is the notorious Pooh, the twisted mind behind the Laughing Coffin massacre.
Precise. Remember how someone tipped the assault team off about Laughing Coffin's hideout? Well, that someone was me!
He confesses his grand fetish, forcing Goody Two-Shoes heroes to become cold-blooded killers just like him. He demands they hand over the vegetable protagonist on a silver platter, while Asuna screams in absolute despair. Right on cue, the old Sword Art Online server decides it's the perfect time to wake up and shine. With the server rebooting, Vasago raises his sword to mince our useless catatonic protagonist, but Eiji and Yuna pop up like two cosplayers lost at the wrong convention. Eiji tries to go full vengeance mode to honor the Laughing Coffin victims, but he gets wrecked by the psychopath and has to be dragged out of the arena by his virtual idol girlfriend. Two players from the Red Horde finally recognize Vasago's ugly face from the SAO days and try to warn the rest of the mob, but the crowd completely ignores them, proving that skipping the tutorial always ends badly. Vasago then activates his mind manipulation powers, sending the entire horde into a schizophrenic frenzy, forcing everyone to slaughter each other in a bloody mosh pit. We then learn the villain's tragic backstory. His Japanese father went out for smokes, vanished, and came back years later only to beg for a kidney for his legitimate son. Vasago was so offended by the audacity that he bought a death helmet just to enter a virtual game and gut every Japanese person he saw. Meanwhile, Subtilizer is about to send Sinon to the afterlife, but she pulls a miracle counterattack out of her sleeve, rips a chunk out of the monster, and makes him retreat. Miles away, Lifa steamrolls hundreds of players, swinging her massive attributes around until she passes out from pure exhaustion on the ground. In the real world, Rinko solves the traitor problem with the subtlety of a sledgehammer, hurling a giant wrench that startles Yanai. He plunges off the catwalk straight into Hell's lap. With the armed pest out of the way, Higa gets back to the keyboard to use the harem mental power of the three main girls to try and jumpstart our beloved protagonist's fried brain. While the psycho Vasago continues playing Fruit Ninja on the battlefield, our useless protagonist keeps taking his beauty sleep, trapped in his own childhood traumas. Asuna is about to throw in the towel and accept the end until a voice whispers in her ear. It's Yuki, the ghost friend returning from the beyond, just to give her that motivational nudge. Fueled by determination pulled out of thin air, Asuna stands up and unleashes a monstrous attack that nearly sends Vasago to the Shadow Realm. But the villain has plot armor on his side. He sucks energy from the environment like a giant vacuum cleaner, heals his wounds, and orders his red army to keep the party going. Meanwhile, the girls try a spiritual resuscitation on Kirito by fusing their hearts, but the real MVP is Higa, who notices a blinking signal on the blue rose sword. That's right, a fragment of Yu-Gi-Oh's soul was still stuck to the blade. The blonde boy's spirit penetrates deep into Kirito's mind, reminding him of his duty to protect the underworld. That's enough to give the boy's system a massive shock. He finally finally opens his eyes in the middle of the chaos, grabs the Frost Blade, and releases its maximum power, freezing the red extras in a heartbeat. Seeing Vasago about to slice his friends, Kirito finally decides to clock in for work and runs out to show everyone who actually owns the server. The protagonist finds himself in the worst possible spot, trying to hold off Vasago with one arm while protecting the exit gate, proving that being the hero is a lot of work. Just when he thinks about quitting, Yujio's ghost appears smiling at his side, suggesting he finally use both swords at once. Together they fire off a wave of light so absurd, it mass logouts every red player on the server in one go. Vasago is foaming at the mouth and tries to drain the life force of the fallen, but Kirito is faster at the energy thieving game. He restores Yujio's sword to its original size, and, in a show of pure flexing, reverts to his classic black swordsman skin from the death game. The final clash happens, and Kirito completely humbles Vasago. As punishment, he uses his sword to turn the psychopath's avatar into a giant tree, trapping the poor bastard in the underworld forever, while his real body shrivels up like a forgotten piece of fruit. After healing the survivors and giving one last peace out to Yujio's spirit, Kirito rushes to help Alice at the World's End altar. In the real world, the situation is a disaster. The Americans activate the server's turbo mode, threatening to accelerate time by millions. Kikuoka screams in Kirito's ear to get out with Asuna, or they'll turn into fossils trapped for 200 years. Alice reaches the altar, but her dragons refuse to leave her side, and nearly end up as dragon kebabs at Miller's hands. Luckily, Kirito spawns out of nowhere to save the giant lizards. To prevent the dragons from becoming a villain's designer handbag collection, Kirito turns the beasts back into eggs and tosses Alice into Asuna's arms so they can run for the altar. Now it's just the protagonist against the pay-to-win Miller. Even with all his hacks active, Kirito takes a beating from the enemy's ridiculous power until he decides to say screw it and unleashes the full potential of both swords. The attack creates a prison around Miller and turns the entire sky into a star-filled night. In a blatant homage to classic tropes, Kirito begins receiving the feelings and energy of all his friends on the outside. And of course, Yujio's ghost shows up again to help him hold the sword. With that spiritual boost, Kirito lands the final blow, forcing Miller to eat dirt and get forcibly logged out the exact second the server hits max acceleration. The villain is toast, but Kirito realizes he didn't make it out in time and is now stuck for the next 200 years rotting inside the game. He collapses and starts crying like a baby who lost his pacifier, but when he looks up, he gets the shock of his life seeing Asuna standing there. The girl is so obsessed, she chose to ignore the logout button just so she could stay trapped for 2 centuries sharing virtual oxygen with him. While Rinko finally manages to download the golden waifu onto a high-end flash drive and prepares to bail, Asuna makes the most questionable life choice ever and decides to spend 200 years locked in a server with our useless protagonist. While the 2 virtual lovebirds prepare for a hyper-accelerated honeymoon, the big bad Gabriel Miller wakes up in the real world, only to realize his brain has already turned into liver pate. His soul literally takes the express elevator to hell, leaving his foreign henchmen completely stranded. When the useless critter and the rest of the extraction team realize both Miller and Vasago have failed miserably, they hit the panic button and retreat. But like every good American in an action movie, they leave an explosive present planted in the Ocean Turtle's main engine to blow everyone to Kingdom Come. Fortunately, the plot loves our heroes, and Akihiko Kayaba's ghost decides to show up, possessing a scrap metal robot with the same ease you use to fake work on a Friday. The game's creator disarms the bomb with his mechanical claws and saves the day before mysteriously vanishing. During the escape, Critter notices that Vasago's physical body has disappeared into thin air, proving that even dead, that guy is a problem. Back in the underworld, Kirito and Asuna turn their backs on the World's End altar and fly off to explore their new digital empire, likely ready to spend the next 2 centuries practicing their swordsmanship in absolute peace. In a historic moment that would make any nerd weep, Rinko goes on TV to announce Alice's existence, proving to the world that they finally managed to cram a human soul into a luxury android body. While the metal waifu becomes a global sensation, Higa is in the lab drooling over his keyboard while monitoring the vegetative states of Kazuto and Asuna, who just spent 200 years racking up server mileage. At the same time, the bureaucrat bureaucrat Kikuoka decides to fake his own death just to dodge the government, proving that tax evasion reaches extreme levels in this universe. During the press conference, Alice's protagonist radar goes off, causing the girl to ditch the interview and run straight into our swordsman's arms. As soon as Kazuto opens his eyes, the first thing he does is reveal that Alice's sister ended up as a frozen popsicle in the cathedral, before begging Higa to completely wipe his and Asuna's browsing history, throwing 2 centuries of memories into the trash. After recovering, the couple has a chat with the dearly departed Kikuoka, who's already cooked up a scheme to stop the authorities from confiscating their virtual world. But the big catch is that Higa committed a slight ethical crime and made a pirated backup of the protagonist's 200-year-old soul. This ancestral Kirito secretly chats with the scientist, demanding he find Kayaba's ghost to protect the underworld once and for all. Back in the comfort of his own room, Kazuto finally has his breakdown, crying for his beloved blonde boy, Yujio, until he's comforted by Sugu, who takes the chance to ask her brother to share his trauma. Meanwhile, the peaceful vibes go out the window when Alice feels a chill down her metal spine, and Rinko calls the protagonist in a total panic. Kazuto's phone rings with Rinko freaking out because the over-budget metal waifu has vanished from the lab, but the panic ends as soon as our useless protagonist finds a giant box on his doorstep, discovering that the genius Alice literally shipped herself via free shipping mail. The tin girl climbs out of the box, fuming because our hero didn't have the decency to go back to the underworld with her, resulting in a reconciliation hug to calm things down. Without wasting time, Kazuto drags the robot girl to the family dojo to trade some friendly blows, and shortly after, everyone sits down to celebrate his hospital discharge. Sugu's father gives the classic worried dad speech about the boy's troubles, and Kazuto hangs his head like a kid caught stealing candy. Later, Alice reveals she received a mysterious email with a suspicious IP address that could be the back door to the underworld. Gathering the gang, Kazuto, Asuna, and Alice invade the Wrath Lab, put on the headsets, and take the dive. But instead of grass and swords, they materialize right in the middle of the vacuum of deep space orbiting the planet Cardina. While they're trying to figure out if they downloaded the wrong game, they spot 2 spaceships piloted by futuristic descendants of the old apprentices, Roni A and Tisei. The girls are fleeing from a bizarre space monster with tentacles called the Abyssal Horror. Without a second thought, our trio of broken characters pull out their blades and mince the alien into pieces in the vacuum of space.
Did they kill it?
When the cosmic dust settles, the pilots look at their faces and start bawling, instantly recognizing the legendary Star King, the Star Queen, and the Integrity Knight. With a flash of Yujio's ghost smiling in the background, the girls are visibly moved and set off, newly motivated, ready for their next mission.